Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the participants and all the speakers. I would like to introduce and invite our chairman of Jodhpur branch of CIRC of ICAI, CA Balveer Singh Gelonji, for welcome address. Please, sir.
Thank you, Radhika. Very good evening to all of you. I, CA Balveer Gelot, myself, and on the behalf of Jodhpur branch, welcome today's learned speaker Pooja Trika and CA Pranav Goyal and CA Mayank Makar. I also welcome today's moderator of the program, CA Radhika Goyal, and all professional participants. मैं आपको ये बताना चाहूंगा कि जोधपुर ब्रांच हमेशा जोधपुर मेंबर्स के लिए समय समय पर मेंबर्स का ज्ञान वर्धन के लिए अपडेशन के लिए अलग अलग टॉपिक पर वेबिनार कंडक्ट करती रहती है। इसी कड़ी में आज हमने सीपीई कमेटी के लिए वेबिनार को होस्ट करने का निर्णय किया। मैं आपको ये भी बताना चाहूंगा कि सीपीई कमेटी हमेशा मेंबर्स के नॉलेज के अपडेशन के उद्देश्य से विभिन्न टॉपिक पर अलग अलग स्पीकर की वेबिनार कंडक्ट कराने के लिए जोधपुर ब्रांच और अन्य ब्रांचों का सपोर्ट करती रहती है। और मैं ये भी बताता हूँ कि जोधपुर ब्रांच ने पिछले 6 महीनों में कम से कम 20 वेबिनार को होस्ट किया है मेंबर्स के अपडेशन के लिए। At last, I would also like to thank entire team of CPE committee for giving opportunity to Jodhpur branch to host today's webinar. Thank you. Over to Radhika.
Thank you, sir. Sir, such a warm welcome introduction being given by you. Today we all are here to present the seminar by a learned CA Pooja Trika ma'am and our speaker Pranav Goyalji and Mayank Makar. The seminar is all about the PUFE transactions and the role of CAs in advising startups and negotiations. So now I would like to introduce and invite the treasurer of Jodhpur branch of CIRC of ICAI, CA Abhishek Soniji, to please carry forward this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Radhika ma'am. And good evening to everyone. I am thankful to Jodhpur branch, also the committee, CPE committee, and the chairman of Jodhpur branch, CA Balveer Singh Gelot, sir, for giving me this opportunity to being here in this CPE event. So I just want to have some brief about our today's learned speaker, CA Pooja ma'am, who is giving his session on the PUFE transaction under the IBC. CA Pooja ma'am is a qualified chartered accountant. She became the first lady chairperson of the Amritsar branch of NIRC of ICAI for the executive term 2017 to 18. She has vast experience in the field of statutory audit, financial reviews, internal audits, limited reviews, and concurrent audits. She has also gained experience in the forensic audit and information system audit of the large corporates as well as small and the medium enterprises. So thanks to ma'am for sparing the valuable time for the Jodhpur branch for giving such a valuable learned things to enhance and enrich the knowledge of all the members. And I also welcome other speakers too that they have joined and sparing the valuable time for the Jodhpur branch. So over to you, Radhika ma'am,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite CA Pooja Trika ma'am to enrich our knowledge on PUFE transactions under IBC. And I would like to say it gives me immense pleasure to invite my guru, CA Pooja Trika ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Radhika. Thanks for the warm welcome. I would like to thank the chairperson of the Jodhpur branch, Balveer Gelot sir, Abhishek Soniji, who read my introduction. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing the dais with me and giving us the opportunity to discuss on two very difficult and very intricate transactions, जो आज की date में every chartered accountant is into. One is the PUFE transaction, which I shall take, and I'm very happy to share the dais with Pranav Goyalji and Mayank Makkarji, who will be taking up the financing of the startup organizations. Friends, at the outset, this is actually a wonderful time of the year when all the chartered accountants are gearing up for filing of the returns. All the best. The task is humongous, actually, because of the site, but the team is working hard, and I think we all are working therein. Friends, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was introduced in 2016 by Act of the Parliament. But I would to give you a brief of what IBC is and how it has come very quickly. I would just say it's an act which has been drafted very quickly. It is an act which has been immediately implemented. An act which gives the court biting teeth. जैसे बहुत सारे पहले insolvency or resolution के लिए there were many acts and many provisions were available. 1985 का अपना सिका था, बिफर था, बोर्ड फॉर इंडस्ट्रियल एंड फाइनेंशियल रिकंस्ट्रक्शन था. 1920s around there was an act which was the Insolvency Prevention Act. All these acts were in place, provided for the resolution of insolvency proceedings, but all these acts were leading through the civil courts. And the procedures in civil courts are so tiring in the sense that it takes 15 to 20 years time period for settlement of any dispute because of the viewpoint of the court with regard to taking up the events to the last resort, giving opportunity to each and every person. So for that matter, the insolvency and resolution proceedings used to be time consuming. And in the meantime, what was happening was the value of the assets was being lost. Since the value of the assets was getting depleted, the assets were not recovered in time. This led to actual loss of the revenue of the organizations as well as important resources of the country. Ease of doing business is, friends, something which has been the motto of our government as of now, ensuring that all the people who are working in the corporate structure or in the business structure, who are basically providing remuneration, livelihood to the people. All these activities, corporate activities, may be productive, may not be productive. Sometimes the business model is successful and sometimes the business model ends up into losses. So to provide for those losses to be covered up, providing for those assets to be recovered timely, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was conceived by the BLRC Committee of the Parliament, prepared, drafted in 2014, and was actually implemented by an act in May 2016. So in just a period of 2 years, the act has actually been, from conception to actual driving it out, the act has actually implemented from May 2016. फ्रेंड्स, ये बैकड्रॉप में मैं आपको इसलिए समझा रही हूँ बिकॉज मेरा सेमिनार जो है वो स्टैंड अलोन सेमिनार है. इट्स पर्टिकुलरली बेस्ड ऑन पफ ट्रांजैक्शंस. You would be wondering why PUF. It is preferential, undervalued, fraudulent and extortionate transactions. जब भी कोई बिजनेस मॉडल बनता है या बिजनेस मॉडल आगे फेलियर में अगर चला भी जाता है तो उसको समझना बहुत जरूरी है कि what were the reasons of such failure. What is the reason that the organization could not do well? Whether there was some siphoning of funds, whether there was some fraudulent transaction because of which the funds and the finances which were given to the organization have been taken away and siphoned off. So all these things have to be actually seen. Friends, at the outset, I would say कि आज की डेट में भी this act when it's conceived and implemented in 2016, आज तक around about 5,000 cases इसके अंदर आ चुके हैं officially. उन 5,000 cases में से 1283 आप देखेंगे, 1283 are the number of cases which have actually ended up into resolution. Around 400 to 500 cases have ended up with a resolution plan. तो बहुत सारे cases अभी भी hung में हैं. This act has come up with an idea of resolving the process within a period of 180 days. So there is a time limit. You cannot linger on the entire process for lifetime and the assets get depleted. Here, the motto of the entire code has been to actually maximize the value of the assets from the position of debtor in control. The position is a creditor in control. The ones who have given loans, the ones who have given finances to the organization will be the people who will be controlling the organization as soon as the problems with regard to resolution are being solved. Problems with regard to proper working of the organization is being solved. So I will be taking up 4 important sections of IBC, which will be section 43, 45, 47, and 60 and 66. I'll cover up both of them. Radhika, can I share my screen, please?
Yes, ma'am, you can share your screen.
Okay. Here we go. Slideshow from the beginning. So I'm not sure how many of the participants here have some view about it. I'll try to cover up these topics so that you get an in-depth knowledge of what is the reason of IBC. Friends, जब भी कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में इंसॉल्वेंसी रेजोल्यूशन प्रोफेशनल उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को टेक ओवर करने के लिए जाता है, इट्स एक्चुअली अ बेबी ऑफ अ प्रमोटर. तो प्रमोटर्स बहुत एडमेंट रहते हैं, थोड़े they are not cooperative also. So you are going to find out the reasons of the failure of the organization. So you will need a lot of data. You will need a lot of information with regard to the working of the organization. You need documents to substantiate what were the reasons of that failure. So all these things will be covered as a transaction auditor is being appointed, and he tries to find out those reasons. Here we will be covering section 43, which will be preferential transaction. Then we will be covering our section 45, which will be covering your undervalued transaction. Section 50, which will be the extortionate transaction. Section 66 will be the fraudulent transactions. So these are the PUFs, what we call PUF transactions. Now here we need to understand, first of all, who is liable to identify these transactions. The person who is going to be in charge of the organization is the resolution professional. Friends, as we know, the application for initiation of the resolution process can be done only by a CD himself. There are 3 applications basically. I'll try to cover up those 3 applications. Section 7, Section 9, and Section 10. These 3 applications can be filed by Section 7 will be covered by the financial creditor. Any person who has given any financial asset, a loan to the corporate debtor, will be the person who can file an application under Section 7. Financial creditor, friends, will be covering all those loans which have been given. It will be unrelated party loans, basically. So if your unsecured loan is there, that is also a financial credit. If you have taken a loan from an NBFC, that's also a financial credit. Definitely from the nationalized banks, they are definitely financial credits. So basically the Section 7 applications will be covered up for those transactions where the money has been lended to the corporate debtor. Friends, most of you would be aware that the IBC is applicable and notified only for corporate persons as of now. The bankruptcy proceedings under individual bankruptcy or firm bankruptcy proceedings have yet not been notified. The limit for starting up the initiation of this CIP proceedings is 1 CR as of now. Post-COVID, it had been risen from 1 lakh rupees to 1 crore rupees. तो अभी जो ट्रांजेक्शंस, जो कॉर्पोरेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस जिनका 1 करोड़ से ऊपर का डेट आउटस्टैंडिंग है, उन सब ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस इसके अंदर कवर होती हैं एज ऑफ नाउ अंडर आईबीसी, या जो पुराने ऑलरेडी एडमिटेड केसेस हैं उनके केसेस चल रहे हैं. और जो सीआईएलपी प्रोसेस है फ्रेंड्स, सीआईएलपी प्रोसेस के अंदर जब फाइनेंशियल क्रेडिटर कोई एप्लीकेशन लगाएगा वो सेक्शन 7 में लगाएगा. ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर विल बी अ पर्सन जो कि आपको सप्लाईज देता है, बी इट सर्विसेज, बी इट गुड्स, बी इट रॉ मटेरियल्स, wages, salaries, all these are covered under the operational credits. मतलब जो आपको अपने काम करने के लिए जो आपको फैसिलिटीज आती हैं वो ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिट के थ्रू आती हैं, तो वो ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर्स की कैटेगरी में आ जाते हैं. तीसरी कैटेगरी होती है सेक्शन 10 एप्लीकेशन, व्हिच इज योर कॉर्पोरेट डेटर हिमसेल्फ. तो कॉर्पोरेट डेटर खुद भी अपनी एप्लीकेशन लगा सकता है. एक कॉर्पोरेट डेटर इज फेसिंग सम प्रॉब्लम, जरूरी नहीं है कि प्रॉब्लम ही हो. समटाइम्स अगर कोई कॉर्पोरेट डेटर का कोई पर्टिकुलर टाइम पीरियड के लिए आपने कोई एक्टिविटी शुरू करी है, कोई कॉर्पोरेट शुरू करी है और टाइम पीरियड खत्म हो गया है, या जॉइंट वेंचर है फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर पीरियड और फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर असाइनमेंट वो क्लोज हो गया है, तो सेक्शन 10 के थ्रू वॉलंटरी वाइंडिंग अप के लिए भी आप कह सकते हैं. वॉलंटरी वाइंडिंग अप के लिए वैसे एक फास्ट ट्रैक प्रोसीजर सेक्शन 59 भी कवर करता है. सो 7, 9 और 10 3 तरह के एप्लीकेशंस लग गए. उस एप्लीकेशन लगने के बाद CRP प्रोसेस जो इनिशिएट होता है वो 180 दिन के अंदर आपको उसको क्लोज करना होता है। अब आप देखो कि 180 दिन के अंदर आपको कंपनी को रिजॉल्व भी करना है, उसी 180 दिन के अंदर यू हैव टू मेक एन ओपिनियन ऑल्सो। आपको बाय 110th डे आपको ओपिनियन बना लेना है कि व्हाट आर द रीजंस ऑफ द फेलियर, और आपको अगर सेक्शन 43, 45, 50 एंड 66 की एप्लीकेशन लगाने तो उसका एक डिसीजन बना के बाय 115th डे तक आपको उसकी एप्लीकेशन भी लगानी है। सो दैट इज द रीजन आई से कि जो पफ ट्रांजेक्शंस हैं दे आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, और ये जरूरी नहीं है कि रेजोल्यूशन प्रोफेशनल खुद ही उसके लिए प्रोफिशिएंट हो। वी कैन हायर forensic auditors, transaction auditors. So friends, it's an opportunity for the professionals also. There are a lot of chartered accountants who have qualified as FAFD, forensic auditors जो qualified है, they are eligible. Particularly बहुत सारे fellow chartered accountants आज की डेट में सिर्फ यही काम कर रहे हैं। तो basically friends, normally it is normal audit only, but in a detailed analysis आपको उसको करना पड़ेगा और उसका proper audit trail create करना है कि what were the reasons जिसके कारण ये आपके organization fail हो गए, whether they were genuine reasons, whether there were some fraudulent or misconceptions जिसके कारण आपका पैसा साइफन हो गया, और या फिर जानबूझ के आपकी कंपनी को इसमें CRP प्रोसीडिंग्स में धकेला गया है। सो अपना रेगुलेशन सेक्शन 25 सबसेक्शन 2 ऑफ द IBC to file an application for avoidance of transactions in accordance with chapter 3 of IBC. हमें 75th डे तक अपना ओपिनियन बनाना है whether the CD has subjected some transactions under 43, 45, 49, 50 and 66. ये हमारे रेगुलेशन 35A में कैटेगोरिकली मेंशन किया है। And on and before 115th day of the CIRP shall make a determination on such transactions and would inform IBBI. IBBI, friends, is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, which is the parent body which monitors the working of the IPs also, of the insolvency professional agencies also. एंड ऑल्सो अगर आपको कोई प्रॉब्लम्स आ रहे हैं विद रिगार्ड टू फाइलिंग ऑफ एप्लीकेशंस या NCLT के प्रोसीडिंग्स में, दैट इज द पेरेंट बॉडी जिसको आप अपने आप को रिकमेंड करवाएंगे। RP shall submit all the resolution plans along with the transactions of 43, 45, 49, 50 and 66 which are found and determined under regulation 39. फ्रेंड्स, रेजोल्यूशन एप्लीकेशंस जब हमारे पास आएंगे या कोई हम रेजोल्यूशन प्लान्स भी लेके आएंगे, दे विल कंसिडर कि क्या कोई ऐसे प्रोसीडिंग्स या कोई ट्रांजैक्शंस ऐसे हैं जिनको रोल बैक करके आपको और पैसा रिकवर हो सकता है। सो फ्रेंड्स, एज आई से कि CRP प्रोसीडिंग्स जो है वो बेसिकली मोटो उसका सिर्फ यही है, मैक्सिमाइजेशन ऑफ वेल्थ, इंश्योरिंग दैट all the transactions which were done with an intention to defraud the creditors or with an intention to defraud the financial creditors, siphon of the funds, misutilization of the funds, this all shall be rolled back, and the person who is liable for the same shall be bound, held guilty, held liable, and all his personal assets will also be recoverable अगर आपने ऐसा कुछ कर रखा है तो। RP need to mention details of the application filed, pending or orders which have been obtained in format compliance certificate रहता है, along with the resolution plan before the adjudicating authority. AA, at any point of time, if I'm mentioning AA, it is adjudicating authority, and in case of CRP proceedings, it is NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal. Friends, 180 days is the benchmark period जहां तक आपको अपना रेजोल्यूशन प्लान लाना है, which can be further extended by 90 days. आप अपनी एप्लीकेशन विद द एजुकेटिंग अथॉरिटी लगा के you can extend that period for further 90 days. तो ये जो मैक्सिमम टाइम पीरियड है उसके ऊपर भी बेंचमार्क 330 डेज का लाइट मतलब मैक्सिमम टाइम पीरियड है जिसके अंदर आपको ये सारे प्रोसीडिंग्स क्लोज करने हैं। तो रेजोल्यूशन अगर आपका नहीं हो पाया, आपके पास रेजोल्यूशन प्लान नहीं आया, तो फ्रेंड्स आपकी कंपनी 180वें दिन लिक्विडेशन में चली जाती है। तो एज सच ये जो अवॉइडेबल ट्रांजैक्शंस है, अगर आप बाय चांस बाय 75th डे नहीं ढूंढ पाए और 115th डे तक आप नहीं एप्लीकेशन कर पाए, लिक्विडेशन के दौरान भी अगर आपको कोई एप्लीकेशन ऐसे मिलती है या कोई ऐसे ट्रांजैक्शंस, कोई ऐसे डॉक्यूमेंट्स मिलते हैं which help you build up an opinion about it, तो वो आप इसके अंदर कवर करके लिक्विडेटर की भी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी इसके अंदर आती है। Now let's understand what are preferential transactions. Preferential जैसे कि नाम बोलता है, any preference given, right? So any transfer of property or any transfer of an interest of a corporate debtor, तो ये जो चीजें आपने करी हैं और ये ट्रांजैक्शन जो आपने की है इसमें आपने प्रेफरेंस दिया है या आपने उस बंदे को प्रेफरेंस दिया है जो आपके साथ रिलेटेड था या उस क्रेडिटर को प्रेफरेंस किया जो आपके साथ रिलेटेड था। जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल एक सिंपल सा एग्जांपल बोलती हूँ, बहुत सारे आपके क्रेडिटर्स हैं और सारे प्रोराटा है, लेकिन कोई एक पर्टिकुलर क्रेडिटर है जिसके साथ या तो आप रिलेटेड हो या आप उसको प्रेफरेंस देके या उसके साथ कोई ऐसी ट्रांजेक्शन्स कर रखे हैं जिसका ओवर बिलिंग हो रखा है, तो आप उनको पेमेंट जल्दी कर देते हो, ठीक है, या आप उनको कोई प्रॉपर्टी ट्रांसफर कर देते हो, तो या आप उनका क्लेम जो है पहले सेटल कर देते हो. सो दिस इज गोइंग टू बी अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजेक्शन. ठीक है. अब यहाँ पे हमने मेंशन किया था वर्ड प्रॉपर्टी. व्हाट इज प्रॉपर्टी? प्रॉपर्टी वुड इंक्लूड एवरीथिंग, मनी, गुड्स, एक्शनेबल क्लेम्स, लैंड, every description of property which is situated in India or outside India. Outside India हम फ्रेंड्स इतना अच्छे से कवर नहीं कर पाते बिकॉज अभी क्रॉस बॉर्डर इंसॉल्वेंसी में थोड़े से इश्यूज चल रहे हैं, बट हाँ, इट इज गेटिंग रिजॉल्व, इट इज गेटिंग मोर अटेंशन ऑफ द अथॉरिटीज एंड डेफिनेटली डाउन द लाइन जिन कंट्रीज के साथ हमारा MOU है उन कंट्रीज के साथ तो आप उनके फॉरेन एसेट्स को भी रिकवर कर सकते हैं. सो एवरी डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ इंटरेस्ट इंक्लूडिंग प्रेजेंट, future, vested, contingent interest arising out of or incidental to that property. अभी इंटरेस्ट की डेफिनेशन कोई दिया नहीं है स्पेसिफिकली, लेकिन सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट या बेनिफिशियल इंटरेस्ट जो हम नॉर्मल पैरालाइंस में कॉर्पोरेट एक्ट्स में यूज करते हैं, वी विल यूज द सेम फॉर हिम. अब सेक्शन 43 क्या कहता है? प्रेफरेंस इज सेड टू हैव बीन गिवन वेयर अ ट्रांसफर ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी हैपेंस फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ अ क्रेडिटर, श्योरिटी और अ गारंटर, एंड सच ट्रांसफर puts the creditor in a beneficial position than he would have obtained in the event of distribution of assets. Friends, waterfall mechanism में जब आपके assets liquidate होते हैं और आपके recoveries होते हैं, so there is a pattern of waterfall mechanism wherein it is already decided कि किसको पहले पैसे देने हैं. So सबसे ऊपर top the waterfall में सबसे ऊपर recovery पे रहते हैं हमारे secured creditors जिन्होंने लोन दिया होता है. Financial creditors on the top priority पे रहते हैं. Then comes the workman dues, then the salaries, outstandings जो भी हो गए उनके, वो सब कवर होंगे. उसके बाद आते हैं आपके ये अनसिक्योर्ड लोन्स. इसमें अनसिक्योर्ड लोन्स भी होंगे, अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर्स, ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर्स भी होंगे. गवर्नमेंट ड्यूज भी आपके ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर्स की कैटेगरी में आते हैं. सो गवर्नमेंट को भी आप देखेंगे, जैसे बिफोर या सिका था तो उसमें गवर्नमेंट ड्यूज की प्रायोरिटी होती थी, दे वर एट द टॉप ऑफ द लैडर, उनके रिकवरीज पहले होते थे. IBC में प्रोसीजर बिल्कुल चेंज्ड है. वाटरफॉल मैकेनिज्म के अंदर सबसे ऊपर आपके अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर्स सिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर्स आते हैं, व्हिच आर योर फाइनेंशियल क्रेडिटर्स. उनके बाद आपके वर्कमैन ड्यूज एंड वर्कमैन अथॉरिटीज के जो भी ड्यूज होंगे वो क्लियर होंगे, और उसके बाद अनसिक्योर्ड लोन्स एंड ऑपरेशन क्रेडिटर्स आएंगे. तो फ्रेंड्स, इस पूरी कैटेगरी में अगर कोई व्यक्ति अनसिक्योर्ड कैटेगरी में था या एक ऑपरेशनल क्रेडिटर था जिसको वाटरफॉल मैकेनिज्म में सिर्फ 30 पैसा इन रुपी मिलना था, और उस क्रेडिटर को आपने अभी इसका टाइम पीरियड आपको समझना जरूरी है कि आपने अगर उसको ऐसा कोई बेनिफिट दे दिया और उसको 100% रिकवरी करा दी और उसी पीरियड के बाकी क्रेडिटर्स को आपने पे नहीं किया, तो फ्रेंड्स इट विल बी कैटेगराइज्ड एज अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन. सो यू हैव टू मेक श्योर देयर इज डिफरेंस बिटवीन अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन एंड आर्म्स लेंथ ट्रांजैक्शन. इफ यू हैव गिवन मनी और रीपेड अ क्रेडिटर इन फुल based on the arm's length transaction, there was a proper agreement to it and you have paid the creditor in full because of the contract or to honor the contract or because he was essential supplier, तो उस केसेस में वो प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन नहीं होगा. अदरवाइज अगर आपने उसको प्रेफरेंस दिया है, बाकी क्रेडिटर्स, मेरे 10 क्रेडिटर्स हैं, सेम कैटेगरी के हैं, सेम एसेंशियल सप्लायर्स वाले हैं, उसमें से कोई 2 क्रेडिटर्स जो मेरे रिलेटेड पार्टी भी हो सकते हैं, मेरे नॉन रिलेटेड पार्टी भी हो सकते हैं, उनको मैंने प्रेफरेंस देके पे कर दिया और बाकी क्रेडिटर्स को पे नहीं किया, तो फ्रेंड्स यू हैव टू मेक श्योर कि आप उस तरह की ट्रांजैक्शंस को, उस तरह के बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट पे जो भी एंट्रीज हो रखे हैं उनको डिटेल में एनालिसिस करें कि हाउ व्हाट वाज द पैटर्न ऑफ द पेमेंट ऑफ द क्रेडिटर्स एंड व्हाई पर्टिकुलर क्रेडिटर हैज बीन पेड इन एडवांस, राइट. तो ये समझ के अपन चलेंगे तो ये हम प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस को ढूंढ पाएंगे. जो ट्रांजैक्शंस को हम प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस नहीं मानेंगे वो कौन सी ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं? एनी ट्रांसफर which is made in the ordinary course of business. Friends, as I already said, जो चीज आपने नॉर्मल बिजनेस पैरालाइंस में किया है, जो चीज आपने अपने नॉर्मल बिजनेस वर्किंग मॉडल में काम किया है, जो टर्म्स ऑफ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स हैं या जो आपके एग्रीमेंट्स हैं विद द क्रेडिटर्स, आप उसमें जो भी काम कर रहे हैं और उसमें कहीं पे भी बायसनेस, प्रेफरेंस नहीं दिख रहा है, दैट इज नॉर्मल ट्रांजैक्शन. Any transfer creating a security interest in property acquired by the corporate debtor to the extent that such security interest secures a new value or was given at the time of or after the signing of a security agreement. तो आपको बेटा ये देख के चलना है फ्रेंड्स कि किस तरह का सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट हुआ है. कोई न्यू वैल्यू आपने ऐड की है जिसके अगेंस्ट सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट आपने उसको दिया. अगर आपने कोई लैंड परचेज किया और उसकी पेमेंट इन एडवांस कर दी दैन द क्रेडिटर्स या बैंक को, और उससे आपका जो अजॉइनिंग लैंड आपने खरीद ली और उससे आपका जो लैंड की वैल्यू थी आपको फ्रंट मिल गया या बाईपास पे कवर हो गए या मेन रोड पे कवर हो गए, तो वो अगर आपने कोई वैल्यू एडिशन के लिए ऐसी कोई ट्रांजेक्शन की है, ऐसी सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट किया है, तो वही आपको मैच करना है क्या बेनिफिट आ रहा था इस ट्रांजेक्शन से। अगर मुझे उस बेनिफिट के अगेंस्ट उसकी कॉस्ट को वे करना है, अगर मैं इस तकड़े में देख रही हूँ कि दोनों बैलेंस में है, देन इट्स एब्सोल्युटली फाइन। अगर वो दोनों बैलेंस में नहीं है फ्रेंड्स, तो फिर वो एक प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन की कैटेगरी में खड़ी हो जाएगी। Then such transfer was registered with an information utility on or before 30 days after the corporate debtor receives possession of such property, provided that any such transfer made in pursuance of the order of the court shall not preclude such transaction to be deemed as giving preference by the, मतलब ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि अगर आपके पास कोर्ट प्रोसीडिंग्स है तो वो प्रेफरेंस की कैटेगरी से बाहर जा सकती है। कोर्ट प्रोसीडिंग के अलावा भी आपको बेनिफिट्स और उसके कॉस्ट को वे करना है। अगर आपके बेनिफिट्स और कॉस्ट की वेइंग के कैटेगरी में पलड़ा भारी हो जाता है कि आपने कॉस्ट ज्यादा इनकॉर्पोरेट करी, तो वो प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन की कैटेगरी में शिफ्ट हो सकती है। नाउ अब आप बोलेंगे कि अगर ऐसा है तो फिर हम सारी ट्रांजैक्शंस को देखेंगे, नहीं ऐसा कुछ नहीं। सेक्शन 43 के टाइम लिमिट है। अगर आप रिलेटेड पार्टी ट्रांजैक्शंस को वेरीफाई कर रहे हो तो CIRP डेट से आपको 2 साल पीछे देखना है, to see 2 years from the date of the initiation of the CIRP. I'm not saying from the date of admission of application, saying CIRP initiation date. आपने एप्लीकेशन लगाई है उस पीरियड से नहीं शुरू करेंगे। जब आपको कोर्ट का ऑर्डर आ गया, आपका CIRP प्रोसीडिंग्स इनिशिएट हो गए, वो डेट आपकी CIRP इनिशिएशन डेट होती है। उस डेट से पिछले 2 साल का पीरियड आपने बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स को प्रॉपर्ली चेक करना है टू इंश्योर दैट ऑल दीज ट्रांजैक्शंस आर एक्चुअली in line, in business parallels, normal business कैटेगरी के अंदर आते हैं, कोई प्रेफरेंस नहीं दिया गया, पैसों का डिफ्रॉडिंग नहीं हुआ। और अदर पार्टी से अगर रिलेटेड पार्टी नहीं है, नॉर्मल अदर पार्टी है विच इज नॉट हैज नो कनेक्शन विद द कॉर्पोरेट, तो उस केस में आपको 1 साल पीछे जाना, तब 2 साल पीछे नहीं जाना, तब 1 साल पीछे जाना। ओके, अब हमने एप्लीकेशन लगा दी तो हमें उसका बेनिफिट क्या होगा? फ्रेंड्स, जो भी प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस हुए होंगे वो रोल बैक हो जाते हैं, राइट? बट दैट इज द रीजन when I'm saying all the time that CIRP is all about maximizing the wealth of the corporate, ensuring timely recoveries. So this is what is expected. हमारे को ऑर्डर क्या क्या दे सकता है? वेस्टिंग ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टी बैक टू CD. सपोज मैंने किसी को प्रॉपर्टी ट्रांसफर कर दी एट लेस अ वैल्यू, तो अगर मैंने प्रूव कर दिया कि ये एक प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन है और एजुकेटिंग अथॉरिटी इज कन्विंस्ड अबाउट दैट, इट विल रोल बैक दैट ट्रांजैक्शन। जो टाइटल डीड भी अगर ट्रांसफर हुआ होगा तो प्रॉपर्टी रोल बैक होके कंपनी के पास वापस आ जाएगी। लिक्विडेटर अगर प्रोसीडिंग चल रहे हैं तो लिक्विडेशन के एस्टेट का पार्ट बन जाएगी, और अगर नॉर्मल CIRP प्रोसीडिंग्स है तो इट विल रोल बैक टू द CD itself. Release or discharge in whole or in part of the security interest which is created by the CD. अगर आपने कोई CD ने कोई कॉर्पोरेट सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट किया है किसी एक बंदे को प्रेफरेंस देके, तो उस सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट को रोल बैक किया जाएगा और टाइम पीरियड वही रहेगा, 2 साल विद रिलेटेड पार्टीज, 1 year विद नॉन रिलेटेड पार्टीज। Directing the person to pay such sum in respect of benefits received by him from the corporate debtor to the liquidator or the resolution professional as the executing authority में डायरेक्ट। अगर किसी ने कोई स्पेसिफिकली पैसा रिकवर कर लिया तो उससे वो पैसा वापस लाना, उसका भी ऑर्डर एजुकेटिंग अथॉरिटी देगा। डायरेक्ट एनी गारंटर whose financial debts or operational debts owed to any person were released or discharged in whole or in part by giving the preference to the to be under such due or revised financial debt or operational debts। मतलब उसका जो नॉर्मल पैरेलेंस में अगर किसी ने हाई वैल्यू ट्रांजैक्शन आपके साथ कर लिया और उसके आपने अमाउंट, बेसिकली जब आप एप्लीकेशन फाइल करेंगे ना फ्रेंड्स विद रिगार्ड टू सेक्शन 43 प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस, तो आप क्वांटम आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे कि मुझे ये रिलीफ चाहिए, इस गारंटर का जो क्लेम है उसको आप इस लेवल तक ले आओ, मतलब सिक्योर्ड आप नहीं मानोगे उसको, अनसिक्योर्ड कैटेगरी में ले जाओगे अगर वो एक प्रेफरेंशियल गारंटर है तो। डायरेक्ट फॉर प्रोवाइडिंग सिक्योरिटी और चार्ज any on any property for the discharge of any financial debt or operational debt under the order, and such security or charge to have the same priority as security or charge release or discharge whole or in part। मतलब बेसिकली अगर आपका डिस्चार्जिंग का पॉइंट है तो आप उसको जो सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट आपने क्रिएट किया है वो सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट स्टैंड डिस्चार्ज, You will not have to pay for that as a secured creditor. Who will not be impacted? Anything which does not affect any interest in the property which was acquired by a person other than a CD, or any interest which is derived from such interest and was acquired in good faith and for value. Friends, अगर आपने normal transaction किया है, कोई उसमें हिप एंड हम्प नहीं है, कोई हाई वैल्यू नहीं है, कोई रिलेटेड पार्टी नहीं है, और जो नॉर्मल बिजनेस पैरालेंस है, जो नॉर्मल रजिस्ट्री के रेट्स हैं या जो नॉर्मल वैल्यू है, तो आपको उसमें डरने की कोई बात नहीं है. अल्टीमेटली जब भी एप्लीकेशन सेक्शन 43 की फाइल होगी, the party against whom the action is sought will be given an opportunity to substantiate and to prove as to why this transaction should not be considered as a preferential transaction. Shall not require a person who received the benefit from the preferential transaction in good faith for value or to pay a sum to the liquidator or the resolution. Most common examples, जो मैं आपको बेसिकली एग्जांपल्स मैंने इसलिए कवर अप किए क्योंकि मोस्ट ऑफ अस व्हाइल डूइंग द ऑडिट्स, आप अपना टैक्स ऑडिट भी करते हैं, तब भी अपन ये ट्रांजैक्शंस को वेरीफाई करते हैं. सो एज अ चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट, अगर हमारे फेलो चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट्स इसको देख रहे हैं तो उनके लिए एक बड़ा अच्छा बिजनेस अपॉर्चुनिटी है ये, बिकॉज प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस की वेरिफिकेशन, आइडेंटिफिकेशन चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट से बेटर कोई कर नहीं पाता, बिकॉज नॉर्मल ऑडिट्स में हम लोग ये सब कर रहे हैं. एनी पेमेंट टू एन अनसिक्योर्ड फैमिली लोन ड्यूरिंग द लुक बैक पीरियड, बहुत ही इजी तरीका है. आपको दिख रहा है, आपको ट्रेमर्स फील हो गए कि जी अब तो ये कंपनी जो है डॉलरम्स में है और इसमें 1-2 साल में लिक्विडेशन में चले जाएगी, तो आपने क्या किया, जितने आपके फैमिली के, बिकॉज आप देखो कि फ्रेंड्स कि नॉर्मली प्राइवेट लिमिटेड कंपनीज जो है वो क्लोज एंडेड कंपनीज होती हैं, फैमिली मेंबर्स ही उसके डायरेक्टर्स, शेयर होल्डर्स होते हैं, और जो नॉर्मल फंडिंग फाइनेंसिंग होती है अगर आपकी बाहर से नहीं हो रही है, बैंक से नहीं हो रही है, तो फैमिली से ही फंड्स एंड फाइनेंसेस आते हैं. तो वो जो फैमिली और फ्रेंड्स के फंड्स एंड फाइनेंसेस है वो अनसिक्योर्ड लोन्स की फॉर्म में होते हैं. तो आपने अगर किसी भी अनसिक्योर्ड लोन को पहले पे कर दिया और सिक्योर्ड लोन आपका खड़ा है और आपका एसेट जो है वो डिप्लीट हो गया है, आपके स्टॉक्स डिप्लीट हो गए हैं और सारा फंड्स आपके डाइवर्ट हो गए हुए हैं, और आप ऐसा कुछ ट्रांजैक्शन करेंगे, तो वो एंट्री रोल बैक होगी एट एन अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर या अनसिक्योर्ड लेंडिंग, तो जिसने आपसे ये पैसा वापस ले लिया है, जो हमारा फैमिली मेंबर ही होगा प्रोबेबली, उससे वो पैसा वापस कंपनी में रोल बैक होगा. The adjudicating authority can direct him to get the money back. Then, payment of an old operational creditor other than a regular business payment against supply of goods or services while the debt of the secured creditors or the unsecured financial creditors are still outstanding. आपने नॉर्मल बिजनेस कैटेगरी में जो पुराने आपके क्रेडिटर्स थे उनको पहले पे कर दिया. अच्छा, अभी क्या हुआ कि ऐसा नहीं है कि आप किसी क्रेडिटर को पे कर रहे हो, नहीं कर रहे हो, उसमें कुछ, कोई क्रेडिटर ऐसे होते हैं जिन्होंने आपके केस कर रखा है, सिविल कोर्ट प्रोसीडिंग्स में सूट हुई है और उसके अगेंस्ट आपकी डिक्री आ चुकी है. अगर आप डिक्री को ऑनर कर रहे हैं फ्रेंड्स, तो फिर वो एक प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन नहीं है. लेकिन अगर आप डिक्री को ऑनर नहीं कर रहे हो, आप देयर इज सम फिशी ट्रांजैक्शन इज देयर, कहीं ओवर बिलिंग है या कोई रिलेटेड क्रेडिटर खड़ा है, राइट, तो उन सबको अगर आप पे कर रहे हो तो उसके केस में फ्रेंड्स वो एक प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन हो जाएगा. ठीक है जी. So you have to ensure that this transaction is coming up in some particular manner. ठीक है. नॉर्मल बैलेंस बिजनेस में जो भी करिए कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं, लेकिन अगर आप नॉर्मल बैलेंस बिजनेस कैटेगरी में नहीं काम कर रहे हैं तो फिर ये आपके लिए डेंजरस चीज. थर्ड पॉइंट, पेमेंट टू एन अनसिक्योर्ड फाइनेंशियल क्रेडिटर may be as per a prefixed loan installment while the debt of the secured creditor still outstanding. आप अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर्स को जिनके साथ आपका लाइजनिंग है, लेट्स से आपने उनसे फंड्स का अरेंजमेंट किया हुआ था एंड देन यू नो कि ये पैसा वापस मेरे पास ही आ जाने वाला है, तो वो अल्टीमेटली जिसे आप कहते हैं ना लिंक्ड ट्रांजैक्शंस. मैंने एक अपनी बुक्स में अनसिक्योर्ड लोन लिया है, जहां मैंने लिया है वहीं पे उसकी सब्सिडरी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में मैंने लोन दिया हुआ, तो रूट एंट्रीज जो होती हैं उसको कंट्रोल करने के लिए प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस को हम कवर करें. फोर्थ, पेमेंट बाय वे ऑफ एडवांसेस to workmen and employees in the regular course of business without any demand from them. आपने बोगस पेरोल बना रखा है, आपने बोगस वेजर्स एंड वर्कर्स का डाटा रिकॉर्ड क्रिएट कर रखा है और आप उनको एडवांसेस पे कर रहे हो. बाकी आपके जो रेगुलर जो कमिंग स्टाफ है, जो रेगुलरली आपके पास आता है, उनके ड्यूज इन एरियर्स. तो फ्रेंड्स, दिस इज अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन. आपने अपने ही कोई दूर के रिलेटिव को एज अ मैनेजर अपॉइंट किया हुआ और उसको आपने 10 लाख रुपए एडवांस दे दिए. बाकी आपके जो क्रेडिटर्स, जो आपके नॉर्मल बिजनेस एम्प्लॉइज हैं या सैलरीड पीपल हैं, उन सबके एरियर्स में चल रहे हैं. तो ऐसा आप किसी को करते हैं विद प्रेफरेंस, तो अल्टीमेटली इट्स अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन एंड विल बी रोल्ड अंडर सेक्शन 43. Payment of secured debt against which the property of the director is mortgaged would be considered as a preferential transaction. Friends, आपने जिस प्रॉपर्टी पे डायरेक्टर का पर्सनल प्रॉपर्टी प्लेज थी, आपने उसको पहले कवर कर दिया, आपने उसको पहले रीपे कर दिया. इंस्टेड ऑफ पेइंग द लोन ऑफ द कॉर्पोरेट डेटर, आपने कंपनी का लोन पे करने से पहले डायरेक्टर के जहां पर्सनल प्रॉपर्टीज प्लेज्ड थी उनको आपने पहले रीपे कर दिया. तो डेफिनेटली इट्स अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन, राइट? Payment to a secured creditor in priority while the debt of the other secured creditor is still outstanding. आपने secured creditor है उसको प्रायोरिटी पे दे दिया, लेकिन बाकी क्रेडिटर्स को, मतलब आप डिफरेंशिएट कर रहे हैं, आपके पास 10 क्रेडिटर्स है, 10 को इक्वली पे कर दो, कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं. 10 में से 4 को एक्सेस पे कर दो, जल्दी पे कर दो, और बाकी 6 को लटका दो. इट्स अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन. फोर्थ, नेक्स्ट, payment to those creditors who have security of post-dated check signed by the directors. Again, जहां डायरेक्टर्स पर्सनली फंस जाते हैं, जहां डायरेक्टर्स जो है वो सिविल कोर्ट में भी लायबल हो जाते हैं, पर्सनली लायबल हो जाते हैं, उन केसेस में आपने पे कर दिया और बाकी क्रेडिटर्स को पे नहीं किया. अगेन दिस इज अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन. पेमेंट ऑफ ओल्ड टैक्स ड्यूज where there exists a risk of prosecution without any order from the court or an authority may also be considered. It will depend on case to case plans. ये चीजें जो हैं, प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस का आइडेंटिफिकेशन और प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस का ढूंढना और उनको एज सच डिक्लेयर करना, ये बेसिकली यू विल हैव टू मेक श्योर दैट दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच यू डू, एनी ट्रांजैक्शन व्हिच यू एंटर इनटू इज डन एट आर्म्स लेंथ. आप अगर कोई चीज प्रेफरेंस किसी पर्टिकुलर डायरेक्टर के लिए करते हो, किसी एक पर्सनल बंदे की बचाने के लिए करते हो, तो भैया वो आपके प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन की कैटेगरी में आएगा ही. एडजस्टमेंट ऑफ डेबिट बैलेंसेस ऑफ डेटर, जहां से आपने पैसा लेना था उसको आपने ऑफसेट कर दिया एक क्रेडिटर के साथ, एक पर्टिकुलर क्रेडिटर के साथ. व्हाई वुड यू डू दैट? जिस चीज से आपको रिकवरी होती और आप किसी को भी बराबर पे कर सकते थे, आपने उसको यूज किया टू पे ऑफ अ पर्टिकुलर क्रेडिटर. तो ये प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन है. सेटिंग ऑफ द डेटर्स विद सम क्रेडिटर्स. तो आपने क्या किया, आपने दो जगह हिट करा. डेटर से जो रिकवरी आनी थी वो सीडी का इनकम होना था या सीडी की रिकवरी होनी थी, आपने उसको लूज कर दिया और उससे क्रेडिटर को पे कर दिया जो कि वाटरफॉल में सबसे नीचे था, राइट? सो इट्स अ प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन. अलॉटमेंट ऑफ फ्लैट्स ऑफ प्लॉट्स बाय अ रियल एस्टेट कंपनी टू सप्लायर्स ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज बिफोर सीआईआई. आपका सीआईपी आ गया. सैंड, सीमेंट और सरिया सप्लायर जो था आपके, वो आपके रिलेटेड पार्टी ही थे, आपके फ्रेंड्स एंड फैमिलीज के ही थे. आपने उनको फटाफट से अपने प्लॉट्स एलोकेट कर दिए. चलो भाई, उनको तो आप पे ऑफ करो. तो आप कहोगे नहीं जी, हमसे नॉर्मल ट्रांजैक्शन की क्रेडिटर था, हमने अपने क्रेडिटर को पे कर दिया. फ्रेंड्स, इट्स नॉट नॉर्मल. इट्स एब्सोल्युटली नॉट नॉर्मल बिकॉज you are going to liquidate the assets of the company to prejudice of the secured creditors. आपने secured creditors को prejudice करके, क्योंकि अगर वो फ्लैट्स नहीं एलोकेटेड होते और ये अनसिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर्स को वाटरफॉल में नीचे पे होता, तो उन फ्लैट्स को सेल करके सिक्योर्ड क्रेडिटर्स की रिकवरी बढ़ सकती थी. तो अगेन सीधी सी बात, अगर जहां आपने किसी को एक प्रेफरेंस का एक पैसा भी दिया तो आपकी वो ट्रांजैक्शन प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन. सेक्शन 45, अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शंस. अंडरवैल्यू, आपने क्या किया कि जो आपका एसेट है, देखो, प्रेफरेंस, अंडरवैल्यूड, एक्सटॉर्शनेट एंड देन फ्रॉडुलेंट, ऑल दीज आर चेन लिंक्ड ट्रांजैक्शंस. माइन्यूट सा डिफरेंस होता है. वहां आपने प्रॉपर्टी ट्रांसफर कर दी, यहां आपने अंडरवैल्यू कर दिया, राइट? वेयर अ ट्रांजैक्शन इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी अंडरवैल्यूड वेयर अ गिफ्ट इज गिवन, राइट? आपने बिना पैसा रिकवर करे आपने किसी को गिफ्ट दे दिया, इट्स अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शन. इट्स नॉट प्रेफरेंस. आपने किसी को भी गिफ्ट दे दिया, आपने किसी को प्रेफरेंस नहीं दी है, आपने वैल्यू अंडरवैल्यू कर दी. या आपने 50 लाख की चीज 10 लाख में गिफ्ट कर दी, राइट? वैसे तो अब इनकम टैक्स भी इसको कवर करता है. सेक्शन 56 एम्पली कवर एनी सॉर्ट ऑफ अनरिलेटेड पार्टी गिफ्ट. लेकिन रिलेटेड पार्टी गिफ्ट्स में क्या होगा? रिलेटेड पार्टी गिफ्ट्स में तो कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं है. अगर आप किसी रिलेटिव से कोई भी गिफ्ट लेते हो तो भाई उसमें तो कोई टैक्स ही नहीं है, तो वो वहां से भी बाहर निकल जाएगा और यहाँ से भी आपने उसका एसेट को लूज कर दिया. ट्रांसफर द एसेट फॉर कंसिडरेशन व्हिच इज सिग्निफिकेंटली लेस देन द कंसिडरेशन प्रोवाइडेड बाय द सीडी. 50 लाख की प्रॉपर्टी 25 लाख में रजिस्ट्री कर दी, दैट्स अ अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शन. 50 लाख की प्रॉपर्टी गिफ्ट कर दी, जीरो वैल्यू रिकवरी, सो इट्स अ अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शन. अगर आपने ऑर्डिनरी कोर्स में किया, प्रॉपर्टी सेल की, 50 लाख की प्रॉपर्टी 51 लाख में बेच दी, आई डोंट माइंड. 50 लाख की प्रॉपर्टी 50 लाख में बेच दी, आई डोंट माइंड. 50 लाख की प्रॉपर्टी 45 लाख में बेची, क्यों? क्योंकि वहां प्रॉपर्टीज के रेट डिवैल्यू हो गए, आई डोंट माइंड. दिस इज नॉट एन अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शन. लेकिन अगर आपने कोई प्रॉपर्टी जो 50 लाख की है, जिसकी मार्केट वैल्यू 75 लाख रुपए है, तो 75 लाख रुपए से भैया आपने 1 रुपया भी कम किया, तो फिर आप तो अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शन में इस ट्रांजैक्शन को कवर कर लोगे. What kind of orders do we expect from the adjudicating authority on these undervalued transactions? Basically, friends, abhi aapko the next session, which will be taken by Pranav Goel and Mayank Makkar ji, वो आपको फाइनेंसिंग कैसे आएगी उसका तरीका बताने वाले हैं. स्टार्टअप ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को कैसे आएगी. फ्रेंड्स, वो सब जब आप कर रहे होते हैं, उसके साथ साथ इन ट्रांजेक्शन्स को भी आपको देखना है. अंडरवैल्यू ट्रांजेक्शन्स अगर आप करके बैंक को लूटने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, तो फ्रेंड्स, गॉन आर दोस डेज. द सिस्टम्स आर वेरी फूल प्रूफ. द organizational activities are checked, vouched, audited. As an auditor also, you are going to face the brunt, hear the music from the our adjudicating authorities, as well as the proceedings, जो penalty proceedings initiate होती हैं, हमारे discipline proceedings initiate होती हैं. So friends, all these transactions you have to be very, very careful. And I say that these PUFE transactions should be read by all the auditors also, company auditors also, because as company auditors also, you are liable for these kind of transactions. If you have audited some books of accounts and you are ignoring these PUFE transactions, friends, you are, I think, gone other days now. Be ready to hear the music from the disciplinary committees. The complaints are being lodged. Recently, 6 members have been, debarred also. उनके licenses have been held for 3 to 7 years का time period में. So friends, as auditors, I think also we all should understand these PUFE transactions. अगर as auditors हमने इन transactions को अपने audit report पे report नहीं किया हुआ, तो ultimately these things not only roll back to the persons who are doing it, they also roll back to the auditors also. Okay? And no intentions to make you, fearful about it. It's just, if you're doing your work properly, I think nothing to worry about. Next, what kind of orders do we expect? To declare such transactions as void and reverse the effect. That means, अगर आपने किसी को गिफ्ट करी है प्रॉपर्टी, वापस आपके सीडी के पूल में ये पैसा वापस आएगा, प्रॉपर्टी वापस आ जाएगी. Require any property which is transferred as part of the transactions to be vested to the corporate debtor. अगर आपने प्रॉपर्टी ट्रांसफर करी है, उसकी ट्रांसफर डीड हो चुकी है, आपने प्रॉपर्टी ट्रांसफर कर दी हुई है, तो भी उस केस के अंदर आप उस प्रॉपर्टी का रोल बैक लेंगे. प्रॉपर्टी विल कम बैक अगेंस्ट यू. रिलीज और डिस्चार्ज एनी सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट. अगर कोई सिक्योरिटी इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट किया है, आपने लोन ले लिया उसके अगेंस्ट प्रायोरिटी चार्ज क्रिएट करके, तो वो भी आपका रोल बैक हो जाएगा. देन रिक्वायर एनी पर्सन टू पे एनी सच सम इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ बेनिफिट रिसीव्ड. उस पर्सन को पर्टिकुलरली यू कैन ऑलवेज टेल देम कि भाई यू हैव टू गिव दिस मनी बैक एंड द ऑर्डर विल कम फ्रॉम द एडजुडिकेटिंग अथॉरिटी. Then require the payment of such consideration for the transaction as may be determined by the independent expert. So ultimately valuation होगी and you'll identify what is the expected and due value for that particular asset. तो उसमें friends हमारे insolvency के अंदर ही valuers आते हैं. Actuarial valuation से लेकर property, architects, financial assets की valuation. So all these valuations can be done by an approved and authorized valuer. And also during CRP proceedings, it is your duty by 47th stage, you have to ensure you appoint 2 independent valuers who will be providing you the valuation for the company. तो ये आप उनसे असाइनमेंट करवा के आप एक प्रॉपर्टी की ट्रांजेक्शन, सपोज मैंने प्रॉपर्टी ट्रांसफर करी थी और उस प्रॉपर्टी के ऊपर फ्लैट बन चुके हैं, तो मैं उस प्रॉपर्टी को रोल बैक नहीं कर सकती. तो उस टाइम पे जो ट्रांजेक्शन हुई थी और व्हेन इट वाज अ पीस ऑफ लैंड, व्हाट वाज द वैल्यू एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम व्हेन दैट अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजेक्शन हैपेंड, उस टाइम पे जो वैल्यू होगी उस वैल्यू के बेसिस पे आप उससे पैसा रिकवर कर सकते हैं. एग्जाम्पल, सेल ऑफ फैंसी एंड एक्सपेंसिव कार्स व्हिच आर ओन्ड बाय द सीडी टू द रिलेटेड पार्टीज और अनरिलेटेड पार्टीज आल्सो एट अ वैल्यू व्हिच इज मच लेस देन द मार्केट वैल्यू. आपने फर्म के नाम से BMW, बेंज और सब निकाला हुआ है एंड you transfer it to your directors or to your key personnel at a value which is much lesser than what the book value is and what the market value is. So fair value is basically what you are going to look up for. सेल ऑफ फैंसी ऑफिसेस और अदर वैल्यूएबल प्रॉपर्टीज ऑफ द सीडी। देखो फाइनेंशियल क्रंचेस चल रहे हैं और आप फैंसी ऑफिसेस बना के अपने प्रमोटर्स डायरेक्टर्स को दे रहे हो, सो दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच इज डाइकोटमी। आप कैसे उसको कर सकते हो? नो, व्हेन यू आर फीलिंग अ फाइनेंशियल क्रंच, यू आर डाइवर्टिंग द फंड्स, सो दिस इज बेसिकली डाइवर्जन ऑफ फंड्स। ऑल दीज ट्रांजैक्शंस विल बी undervalued transactions. Giving of loans and advances to related and unrelated parties without any business objective. आप loans and advances वैसे भी नहीं दे सकते अगर आपके ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के पास रिजर्व्स एंड सरप्लसेस नहीं है, तो इट इज अगेन गोइंग टू बी टैक्स्ड अंडर सेक्शन 222 सब क्लॉज ई एज अ डीम्ड डिविडेंड। तो फ्रेंड्स, ये एक्टिविटी वैसे करते नहीं है लोग, आज की डेट में तो नहीं करते हैं, लेकिन अगर फिर भी आपकी बैलेंस शीट में ऐसी कोई ट्रांजेक्शन्स हैं और आप देखते हो कि आपकी बैलेंस शीट में ऐसे लोन्स एंड एडवांसेस टू रिलेटेड एंड अनरिलेटेड पार्टीज हैं जिसके अगेंस्ट आपको कुछ रिकवरीज नहीं होने वाले हैं, so you will definitely ask for these transactions to be covered under undervalued transactions or preferential transactions if they are preference transactions, and then seek relief from the adjudicating authority. Transfer of good franchises to another person at a value which is much lower than the actual value. Then transfer of shares of subsidiary companies where the business is lucrative at a price which is less than the actual price. Again, आपने जो अपने सब्सिडरी के शेयर्स हैं जो कि हाई वैल्यूड है, आपने स्वेट इक्विटी भी बांट रहे हैं अगर अपने मेंबर्स को, अपने स्टाफ मेंबर्स को, की पर्सनल को, तो स्वेट एग्रीमेंट जो है, स्वेट इक्विटी एग्रीमेंट जो है वो प्रायर होना चाहिए। ऐसा नहीं कि आपको कंपनी में लॉसेस हो रहे हैं एंड प्रॉब्लम्स हो रहे हैं एंड स्टिल यू आर पेइंग वेल टू योर की पर्सनल and you are making them sweat, offering them sweat equity, and that friends will definitely be covered under undervalued transactions. Transfer of brand, copyrights, trademarks which are owned by the CD. Any transfer of intellectual property rights, software, patents, digital assets, etc. So all these transactions, if you are transferring for a value which is lesser than what their actual due value is, you are going to cover, and the RP, resolution profession, is going to cover them under section 45 and will be taking it over. Purchase of any assets at a value which is high to keep the funds of the corporate debtor away from the creditors. Obviously, intention is to defraud the creditors. Settlement of dues of associate concerns, writing off, आपने सन्डे क्रेडिटर्स को, अपने डेटर्स को, एडवांसेस को विदाउट एनी जस्टिफिकेशन राइट ऑफ कर दिया। आपके पास कोई उसका रिटर्न एग्रीमेंट नहीं है या डिफिकल्टी का कुछ नहीं है और आपने बस अपने प्रॉफिट्स को लॉसेस में बनाने के लिए डेटर्स को राइट ऑफ कर दिया, एक्चुअली आप उनसे कैश में रिकवर कर चुके हो। सो ऑल दीज ट्रांजेक्शंस आर अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजेक्शंस। बाइंग शेयर्स ऑफ एन एसोसिएट कंसर्न फॉर अ वैल्यू which is much higher than the actual inherent value. Again, वैल्यू कम नहीं करा, वैल्यू बढ़ा दी। आपके एसोसिएट कंसर्न का शेयर 10 रुपए का था, आपने उसको 150 में खरीदा, तो 10 को 150 में खरीद के आपने किया क्या? अल्टीमेटली आपने 150 140 रुपए वहां ट्रांसफर कर दिए, साइफन्ड ऑफ दोस फंड्स। दिस इज अंडरवैल्यू ट्रांजैक्शंस। अंडरवैल्यू का मतलब सिर्फ यही नहीं है कि वैल्यू बुक वैल्यू से कम है। बाइंग, एक्सपेंडिंग मोर मनी इज आल्सो अंडरवैल्यू ट्रांजैक्शंस, right? Buying of the dead assets of a family associate concern, right? Then is the sale of unsold inventory by real estate companies at a price which is much lesser than the market value. Sale of inventory at a lower value as compared to the actual value. So, एक फिल्मी तड़का सुनाती हूँ। कभी कभी कुछ जीतने के लिए कुछ हारना भी पड़ता है और हार के जीतने वाले को बाजी कहते हैं। ऐसा डायलॉग बहुत सारे डिफ्रॉडिंग प्रमोटर्स, डायरेक्टर्स मारते रहते हैं और बोलते रहते हैं कि ऐसा कोई बात नहीं, ऐसा करते हैं, कुछ साइफन कर लेते हैं पैसे को, कुछ अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शंस कर लेते हैं, कुछ फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शंस कर लेते हैं, 2-3 साल पहले कर लेते हैं। तो भाई गो ऑन अदर डेज। आज की डेट में आपकी वेल्थ डिप्लीशन की वेट नहीं की जाएगी। आपने एक क्रेडिटर के साथ डिफॉल्ट किया, यू आर गोइंग टू हियर द म्यूजिक फ्रॉम द नेशनल कंपनी अथॉरिटी, द एजुकेटिंग अथॉरिटी। Once the application gets admitted, you are the persons, promoters, directors who have fraudulently created and siphoned up these funds will be the ones who will be the first to be out of the organization. And the resolution professional who is, the one who has qualified the insolvency bankruptcy code examination, a fair, independent person who has nothing to do with the CD, who has nothing to do with the FC, will be the person who will be taking charge of the assets of the organization and ensuring that the assets are properly taken care of, the assets are valued and recovered, siphoned off funds are brought back to the organization. जहां जहां भी कंपनी के assets distributed है वहां से consolidate करना उनको, और ensuring that the value of the assets are increased. The assets, if are not runnable, if the organization is not in a running condition, could be sold off to another person who is a resolution applicant, who can bring up a resolution plan to take over the organization. और resolution plan, friends, बहुत ही अच्छा तरीका है एक तरह से फंडिंग एंड फाइनेंसिंग का, क्योंकि आपको एक बेस कॉस्ट कवर नहीं करना है, आपको एक बेस कॉस्ट इनिशिएट नहीं करना है, आपको एक लगी लगाई फैक्ट्री, अगर आपके पास उतनी कैपेसिटी है, उतना एक्सपीरियंस है, उतना विल है टू रन द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, तो आप उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को चला लीजिए जो एक रनिंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है जो कोई और नहीं चला पाया. तो भाई वो जो टाइम पीरियड है फॉर सेटअप ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन और टू सेटिंग अप मशीनरी, बाइंग मशीनरी, ऑल दोज हेडेक्स इज गॉन. अगर आपको एक लगी लगाई फैक्ट्री मिल जाती है तो आपके लिए इजी हो जाता है उसको रन करना. अगर ऑब्वियसली हैशटैग कंडीशंस एप्लीकेबल, अगर रनिंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, there is not much of hanky panky things going on, machinery is there, intact है. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल अभी लेटली आपने देखा होगा रुचि सोया हैज बीन टेकन ओवर बाय पतंजलि ग्रुप, तो वो बहुत ही एक अच्छा टर्न अराउंड रहा, बिकॉज पतंजलि ग्रुप के एक्विजिशन के बाद रुचि सोया के शेयर्स हैव आल्सो इंक्रीज्ड, द वैल्यू हैज इंक्रीज्ड, द सेल्स, द टर्नओवर, द स्टाफ व्हिच वाज वर्किंग विद रुचि सोया इज स्टिल इंटैक्ट. तो देयर इज नो टर्नओवर, लाइक जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में काम कर रहे एम्प्लॉइज हैं जिनका ब्रेड बटर उस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के साथ एसोसिएट होता है, वो उनका ले ऑफ नहीं हुआ. सो एक रेजोल्यूशन प्लान कैन गिव अ रे ऑफ होप टू अ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन व्हिच वाज नॉट प्रॉपर्ली maybe managed. Maybe there were some difficulties with the organization because of funding, financing, or the model was not being properly workable by them. So if another person who's a good manager, a person who has got more experience, उसको एक लगी लगाई फैक्ट्री मिल जाती है, एक बेस मिल जाता है, एक स्टाफ स्ट्रेंथ मिल जाता है. आप सोचिए एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को टेक ओवर करना इज कंपैरेटिवली इजियर. और बिकॉज ऑफ सेक्शन 32A, फ्रेंड्स, आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जब भी रेजोल्यूशन प्लान में एक्विजिशन में आती है, यू गेट अ क्लीन स्लेट. इट हैज नथिंग टू डू विद द ओल्ड ड्यूज, नथिंग टू डू विद ओल्ड झमेलास, ओल्ड एवरीथिंग, जो भी खचर मचर हुआ है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अंदर, उसके लिए प्रोसीडिंग्स अलग से चलते रहेंगे. तो जो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आप एज अ रेजोल्यूशन एप्लीकेंट एक्वायर करेंगे, वो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन आपके लिए एक क्लीन स्लेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है. 32 से आपको प्रॉपर इम्यूनिटी देती है फ्रेंड्स, उसमें आपको वो कंप्लीट क्लियर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है. लेकिन हाँ, अगर कोई एप्लीकेशन 43, 45, 60, 50 एंड 66 की लगी हुई है और उसकी कोई रिकवरीज आने हैं, तो वो प्रोसीडिंग्स साइमल्टेनियसली पैरेलली चलते रहेंगे, लेकिन इट हैज नथिंग टू डू विद द ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस रनिंग, राइट. नेक्स्ट, सेक्शन 50, एक्सटॉर्शनेट ट्रांजैक्शंस. एक्सटॉर्शन से आप समझ ही जाते हो, एक्सटॉर्शन का मतलब ही बदमाशी वाला काम है, गुंडागर्दी वाला काम है, धोखे से कोई काम करना. सो एनी क्रेडिट ट्रांजैक्शन, इट्स अ क्रेडिट ट्रांजैक्शन इन्वॉल्विंग रिसीट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल और ऑपरेशनल डेट. ठीक है जी, इट इज अ क्रेडिट ट्रांजैक्शन. यू हैव टू इंश्योर इट्स अ क्रेडिट ट्रांजैक्शन, रिसीट ऑफ फाइनेंशियल और ऑपरेशनल डेट. Second, Regulation 5 of the CRP regulations, a transaction shall be considered as extortionate under Section 50, subsection 2, where the terms require the CD to make an exorbitant payment in respect of the credit provided or an unconscionable under the principles of law related to the contract. Right? आपने ऐसी ट्रांजेक्शन एंटर करी विच अगर आप नॉर्मल बिजनेसमैन होते, नॉर्मल एक आम ऑर्डिनरी बिजनेसमैन होता, वो उस ट्रांजेक्शन को आर्म्स लेंथ पे देखता तो उसको वो कॉन्शियस नहीं लगता. मतलब आप रॉ मटेरियल परचेज कर रहे हो जो मार्केट में 50 रुपए किलो पे बिक रहा है, आप उसको 150 रुपए किलो पे खरीद रहे हो, तो आप क्यों 150 रुपए किलो पे खरीद रहे हो, उसका क्या कारण है, व्हाट इज द रीजन, राइट. तो वो एक एक्सटॉर्शनेट ट्रांजेक्शन है जो कि एक नॉर्मल पैरालेंस में एक नॉर्मल आम आदमी नहीं करता. आपकी कंपनी लॉसेस में जा रही है, कंटिन्यूसली लॉसेस में जा रही है, एंड स्टिल you are entering into further loans या expansions में जा रही. आप जो रनिंग ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है उसके एसेट्स को या उसकी रनिंग को कंट्रोल करने की, उसको ठीक करने की कोशिश नहीं कर रहे हो, और फंडिंग फाइनेंसिंग कर रहे हो, और आप लोन्स ले रहे हो, तो अल्टीमेटली एब्सोल्युटली एक्सटॉर्शनेट ट्रांजैक्शन. Now it's clarified that any debt which is extended by any person providing financial services which is in compliance with any law for the time being in force in relation to such debt shall in no event be considered as an extortionate trade transaction. मतलब नॉर्मली अगर आपने एक्सटेंड किया है, फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज लिए हैं, कंप्लायंस है विद इन पर्टिकुलर लॉ, फिर नहीं. अगर आपने उसको एक्सॉर्बिएंट ट्रांजेक्शंस कर लिए व्हिच आर नॉर्मल बिजनेस का पैरेलल्स में नहीं चल सकते थे, वो आपके एक्सटॉर्शनेट ट्रांजैक्शंस हो जाएंगे. इसमें अगेन रिस्टोरिंग द पोजीशन क्वायू जैसे थे वैसे आप वापस हो जाएंगे. सेटिंग असाइड द होल डेट व्हिच हैज बीन क्रिएटेड, मॉडिफाइंग द टर्म्स ऑफ द ट्रांजैक्शंस, मे बी रिक्वायरिंग एनी पर्सन हु हैज who was a party of the transaction to repay the amount which he has recovered, require any security interest which was created as part of the extortionate credit transaction, which should be relinquished back again in the favor of the liquidator or the resolution professional, as the case may be or as the situation may be. अभी इसके examples क्या हैं? Taking of unsecured loans from parties at exorbitant interest rates and unfavorable conditions. Then, while the corporate debtor is under financial stress, the suppliers stipulating monopolistic terms to supply credits पे गुड देना. मतलब अगर आप मोनोपोलिस्टिक एक्टिविटी में हो और फाइनेंशियल स्ट्रेस में हो और फिर भी आप ऐसे अपने सप्लायर्स को क्रेडिट पे दे रहे हो जहां पर आपकी मोनोपोली है, जहां आपकी मोनोपोली है, वहां पर क्रेडिट पे क्यों दोगे चीजों को? यू विल तो बाय द थिंग्स एज सच. आपकी चीजें तो ऐसे ही बिक जाएंगी. तो आप जब कोई आप एक्टिविटी कर रहे हो, आपको बिजनेस मॉडल भी समझना है, आपको ये भी समझना है कि मेरे प्रोडक्ट्स की कैटेगरी क्या है, मेरा नॉर्मल क्रेडिट पीरियड क्या है. नॉर्मली जैसे अगर मेरा क्रेडिट पीरियड 45 डेज का है और मैं 4 महीने का क्रेडिट दे देती हूँ, तो किस खुशी में दे रही हूँ भैया? जो नॉर्मल बिजनेस पैरेलल से 45 डेज है तो मैं 4 महीने क्यों दे रही हूँ? सो दैट थिंग हैज टू बी सीन. बोरोइंग फ्रॉम एम्प्लॉइज, डायरेक्टर्स, एसोसिएट्स, हाई रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. बैंक से आपको लोन मिल रहा है 9% पे और आप अपने फैमिली मेंबर से लोन ले रहे हो 18%. ये कहाँ की समझदारी है भैया? तो ये एक्सॉर्बिएंट ट्रांजैक्शन है, एक्सटॉर्शनेट ट्रांजैक्शन है. Next, a question down whether availing of the credit card loan at high rate of interest is an extortion transaction. So food for thought. सोचिए इसके बारे में. Availing of credit from NBFC at 36% rate of interest, whether it will be extortionate transaction. Friends, this is something which we need to decide on the facts of each and every case separately. इसमें कोई standard thumb rule नहीं चलेगा. Let's say आपको एक NBFC लोन तब दे रही है जब आपको फंड्स की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है फॉर बिजनेस मॉडल रिक्वायरमेंट्स और उस टाइम पे आपको कहीं और से लोन नहीं मिल रहा. तो उन सिचुएशन में ये एनबीएफसी से 36% का लिया हुआ लोन भी आपकी एक्सटॉर्शन ट्रांजैक्शन नहीं होगा. फ्रेंड्स, विद अ डिस्क्लेमर दैट दिस इज समथिंग टू बी डिसाइडेड ऑन ऑल द केसेस ऑन केस टू केस बेसिस ऑन व्हाट इज हैपनिंग and how the things are happening and what were the conditions and circumstances when that transaction was actually entered into. Another very, very important transaction is section 66, fraud. अगर तो आपका एक नॉर्मल बिजनेस फेलियर है और दी बिजनेस मॉडल फेलियर जो है वो नॉर्मल कैटेगरी वाला ही है, तो भाई आपको कहीं कोई डरने की जरूरत नहीं है. देयर इज नथिंग टू वरी अबाउट. अगर आपने साइफनिंग ऑफ फंड्स नहीं किया है, आपका जस्ट एग्जांपल, बड़ा इजी एग्जांपल है. आजकल ओला उबर आ गया तो कार्स के मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पे भी और कार के सेल पे भी फर्क पड़ा है बिकॉज लॉट ऑफ पीपल हैव स्टार्टेड टेकिंग अप द सर्विसेज ऑफ ओला एंड उबर. तो ये एक नया बिजनेस मॉडल आ गया जिसने आपके पुराने बिजनेस मॉडल व्हिच वाज द एक्विजिशन ऑफ अ व्हीकल उसको हिट किया है. तो एक नॉर्मल बिजनेस मॉडल फेलियर, राइट? आपने अपने आप को कस्टमाइज किया टू मैन्युफैक्चर टैक्सेस ना या टू मेक कूलिंग कार्स बना लिया या एक्सयूवीज बनाना शुरू कर दिया. बिकॉज देखो फ्रेंड्स, डाउन द लेन बिजनेस मॉडल चेंज होता ही रहता है. कोई भी चीज अगर आप देखो तो लैंडलाइंस होते थे, लैंडलाइन से मोबाइल्स आए, पेजर्स आए. जब सेलुलर फोन्स आ गए, सेल फोन्स आ गए, वायरलेस फोन्स आ गए, तो पेजर्स आउटडेट हो गए. सेलुलर फोन आने से आपका दिस लैंडलाइन हैज आल्सो बिकम आउटडेटेड एज ऑफ नाउ. तो फ्रेंड्स, ये एक नया चीज आई जिसने पुरानी टेक्नोलॉजी को आउटडेट कर दिया. अभी 4G है, अगर 5G आ जाएगा तो 4G टेक्नोलॉजी आउटडेट हो जाएगी. तो ये बिजनेस मॉडल फेलियर है. आपने अपने आप को एक्ट कर लिया, आपने नया मॉडल एक्सेप्ट कर लिया, तो आप उसके अकॉर्डिंगली चेंज हो गए. वो एक अलग कैटेगरी हो गई, लेकिन आप उसको नहीं अडॉप्ट कर पाए, आपके पास बैंड स्पेक्ट्रम का इशू हो गया या ऐसा कुछ प्रॉब्लम है जिसके कारण आपका बिजनेस मॉडल ही फेल हो गया. तो अल्टीमेटली वो एक बिजनेस मॉडल फेलियर है, फ्रॉड नहीं है. लेकिन फ्रेंड्स, अगर आप लोगों के जो ऐसे सीडीज हैं या जो कॉर्पोरेट डेटर्स हैं या जो प्रमोटर्स डायरेक्टर्स हैं, उन्होंने एक चीज के लिए लोन लिया 100 करोड़ का और उसको डाइवर्ट कर दिया इन, लेट्स से आपकी फैक्ट्री थी पैनल्स की, इलेक्ट्रिक पैनल्स की फैक्ट्री थी, आपने 100 करोड़ का लोन लिया. आपको कायदे से वो जो पैसा लिया उसको आपको इलेक्ट्रिक पैनल फैक्ट्री के मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एक्टिविटी में लगाना था, प्लांट एंड मशीनरी परचेज करने में लगाना था. आपने उसको डाइवर्ट करके रियल एस्टेट में डाल दिया. सो फ्रेंड्स, दिस डाइवर्जन ऑफ फंड्स, दिस इज एक्चुअली फ्रॉड. आपको लोन दिया गया था इलेक्ट्रिक पैनल बनाने के लिए, आपने इलेक्ट्रिक पैनल्स नहीं बनाए और आपने अपने आप को इन्वेस्ट कर दिया इन दिस रियल एस्टेट. सो फ्रेंड्स, दिस इज साइफनिंग ऑफ फंड्स. देन इसमें क्या क्या कवर्ड होगा? If during the corporate insolvency resolution process or the liquidation process it is found that the business of the corporate debtor has been carried on with an intention of defrauding the creditors of the corporate debtor or for any fraudulent purposes, the adjudicating authority on the application of the resolution professional pass an order that any person who was knowingly party to carrying on such transaction shall be liable to make contribution to the assets of the corporate debtor. ठीक है? Intention. सेक्शन 66 की जब हम बात करेंगे तो इंटेंशन होना चाहिए टू डीफ्रॉड द क्रेडिटर्स. अभी तक जो हमारे ट्रांजैक्शंस थे विच वर 43, 45, 50, ये सब ट्रांजैक्शंस में इंटेंशन नहीं, ये फैक्चुअल ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं, फैक्ट बेस्ड हैं. यहाँ पर आपने या तो प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शन की है या तो नहीं की है, इट्स अ फैक्ट. इसमें कहीं इंटेंशन नहीं थी डिफ्रॉड, वो हो चाहे ना हो, अगर आपने ऐसा किया है तो वो सेक्शन 43 में हिट हो जाएंगे. लेकिन अगर आपको फ्रेंड्स किसी भी ट्रांजैक्शन को सेक्शन 66 में कवर करना है तो इंटेंशन शुड बी देयर टू डिफ्रॉड द क्रेडिटर्स, राइट? On an application made by the resolution professional during the corporate insolvency resolution process, the adjudicating authority may by an order direct and the director or the partner of the corporate debtor, as the case may be, shall be liable to make such contribution to the assets of the corporate debtor as it may deem fit if before the insolvency commencement date such director, partner knew or ought to have known, उसको पता होना चाहिए, उसकी नॉलेज में ही होगा. ऑब्वियसली द डायरेक्टर ऑफ अ कंपनी ही कैन नॉट जस्ट से कि मेरे को पता ही नहीं था कि कंपनी प्रॉब्लम में जा रही है. मैं पिछली 3 बैलेंस शीटों में लॉसेस देख रही हूँ, कैश लॉसेस देख रही हूँ और मुझे नहीं पता कि कंपनी प्रॉब्लम में है. सो दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच इज अनएक्सेप्टेबल. अगर वो डायरेक्टर या पार्टनर जिसको पता है इसके बारे में ought to have known that there was no reasonable prospect of avoiding the commencement of the CIRP in respect of such corporate debtor, and such director or partner did not exercise due diligence in minimizing the potential losses to the creditors of the corporate debtor, then those directors shall be held liable for having fraudulent transactions being undertaken by them. Right? Now, notwithstanding anything which is contained under this section, no application shall be filed by the resolution professional under subsection 2 in respect of such default against which initiation of this corporate insolvency is suspended as per section 10A. अगर 10A के अंदर एप्लीकेशन विड्रॉल की एप्लीकेशन का एक प्रोविजन रहता है फ्रेंड्स, अगर उसमें एप्लीकेशन विड्रॉल के प्रोविजन चल रहे हैं तो वो एक अलग कैटेगरी हो जाएगी. ठीक है जी? ड्यू डिलिजेंस एंड इंटेंशन. अभी now, what are the transactions with an intent of defrauding the creditors, where the director knew and ought to have known? मैं फाइनेंस का डायरेक्टर हूँ और मुझे फाइनेंशियल ट्रबल्स नहीं पता है, इज समथिंग व्हिच इज अनएक्सेप्टेबल. डायरेक्टर ऑफ पार्टनर डिड नॉट एक्सेस ड्यू डिलिजेंस. मतलब अगर आपने नॉर्मल बैलेंस में कोशिश की उसको रोल बैक करने की या लॉसेस को रिकवर करने की, तो फ्रेंड्स ड्यू डिलिजेंस के लिए भी आपका डॉक्यूमेंटल एविडेंस होना चाहिए. मतलब आपने अपनी तरफ से इंटेंशन किया कंपनी को बचाने के लिए. फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शंस होती कैसे हैं? Any transaction with the object of keeping the assets of the company away from the creditors. Siphoning कर दिया, ट्रांसफर कर दिया. अब आपने अपने किसी रिलेटिव को गिफ्ट किया तो आप उसको सेक्शन 45 में लेके 50 में लेके जाओ, 45 में लेके जाओगे अंडरवैल्यू ट्रांजैक्शन में, या उसको फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शन में लेके आओगे. ये डिसीजन फ्रेंड्स डिपेंड करेगा फैक्ट्स एंड सर्कमस्टांसेस ऑफ द केस एंड विल डिपेंड ऑन केस टू केस. ये हर बार अपने केस बेसिस पे ही आपका डिसाइड होगा ये सारा का सारा पैटर्न. ठीक है जी? इसमें क्या देखोगे आप ये देखोगे कि जो ट्रांजैक्शन हुई है वो किस टाइम पे हुई है. जब आपकी कंपनी में फाइनेंशियल डिफिकल्टीज आ रही है, आपको पैसे नहीं आ रहे हैं और आपने उस टाइम पे ऐसा किया, ये सिचुएशन होगी तो ये एक फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शन है. कंपनी में सरप्लस था, उस टाइम पे कोई ट्रबल नहीं दिख रही थी, लेकिन आपने जैसे ही उन एसेट्स को ट्रांसफर किया ट्रबल शुरू होगी, तो वो एक अंडरवैल्यूड ट्रांजैक्शन है. राइट? तो आपको ये डिफरेंशिएशन है बिटवीन 43, 45, 50 एंड 66. ये सब ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ फैक्ट्स एंड सर्कमस्टांसेस पुट टुगेदर. यू हैव टू डिसाइड ऑन दैट बेसिस whether the transaction has to be categorized as 43, 45, 50 and 66. Friends, categorization करना बहुत important है. कारण ये कि 43, 45 and 50 में intention defrauding की नहीं है, तो factual based transactions हैं. लेकिन अगर आप उनको उन ट्रांजेक्शन्स को 66 में ले आए और आप फ्रॉडुलेंट इंटेंशन को प्रूव नहीं कर पाए, क्योंकि आपको प्रूव करना है इन द कोर्ट ऑफ लॉ दैट द इंटेंशन वाज टू डिफ्रॉड द क्रेडिटर, और आप नहीं कर पाए, तो फिर जो फ्रेंड्स आप उसको वहीं पे लूज कर जाओगे. सो इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट यू डिसाइड एज टू व्हाट कैटेगरी ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शन इज, किस कैटेगरी की ट्रांजेक्शन है, जिसको किस बकेट में डालना है. 4 टोकरियां हैं, आपको उसको प्रॉपर्ली सॉर्ट करके डालो, तभी आपका फायदा है, अदरवाइज आप इसको लूज कर सकते हो. मैनिपुलेशन ऑफ बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स इज एब्सोल्यूट फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शन. अगर आपने अपनी बुक्स को कहीं भी छेड़खानी की है, डेटर्स को, क्रेडिटर्स को ओवर वैल्यू, अंडर वैल्यू किया है, स्टॉक्स के साथ मैनिपुलेशंस किए हैं, एनी ट्रांजैक्शन व्हिच इज रिकॉर्डेड इन द बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स एट हायर वैल्यू और लोअर वैल्यू इज गोइंग टू एंड अप इन फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शन. Forging of documents, absolutely a fraudulent transaction. Falsification of books of accounts. Falsification of books of accounts by making entries which are bogus expenditures. All these. Falsification of the books of accounts to increase the assets of the corporate debtor to give a rosy picture for getting of loans. आपने अपने assets को overvalue करके rosy picture create किया बैंक से excessive financing के लिए, जबकि उनकी value बहुत कम थी. All these are covered under section 66. Very, very important for identifying कि अगर आपकी इस ट्रांजैक्शन में इंटेंशन वाज टू फ्रॉड, इंटेंशन वाज फ्रॉड की डेफिनेशन बड़ी क्लियर है आईपीसी में, और एब्सोल्यूट क्लियर डेफिनेशन, जहां आपकी इंटेंशन दूसरे को प्रॉपर्टी को छीनना, प्रॉपर्टी को लूज कराना, दूसरे से कोई भी तरह का बेनिफिट लेना बाय हाइडिंग ऑफ द फैक्ट्स, बाय गिविंग रोजी पिक्चर्स, ऑल दीज आर कवर्ड अंडर फ्रॉड ट्रांजैक्शंस. साइफनिंग ऑफ इन्वेंटरीज बाय इंक्रीजिंग एक्सेसिव कंजम्पशन, ये बहुत ही नॉर्मल तरीके से लोग करते हैं. ये क्या करते हैं, अगर मेरा 1 किलो का रॉ मटेरियल है which can produce let's say 500 meters of clothes, x amount can produce x amount of output, मैं उस आउटपुट को उतना दिखाती हूँ, कम करती हूँ, so that मेरा उतना वैल्यू जो है वो मैं कैश में सेल करूंगी, मैं कैश में यूज करके अपने जो क्रेडिटर्स हैं उनको डिफ्रॉड करूंगी. फेक फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट विद बैंक ऑफ अकाउंट्स, duplicate bank statements, duplicate books of accounts, duplicate balance sheets. A lot of people were doing it, but thanks to UDIN now, आपका unique document identification, all chartered accountants are placing on the documents which they check. So अगर आपका document पे UDIN नहीं है, so that document is a fake document. There is siphoning away of the corporate debtor by resorting to bogus transactions causing losses and personal gains of the management. Fraudulent removal of the property, undervaluing of the transactions with the fraudulent intent, losing of security in trust, lack of diligence while doing of business. अगर आप अपने बिजनेस में ड्यू डिलिजेंस नहीं कर रहे हैं फ्रेंड्स, तो दिस थिंग, अगर आप ड्यू डिलिजेंस कर रहे हो तो काइंडली डॉक्यूमेंट इट प्रॉपर्ली. अगर आप ड्यू डिलिजेंसली वर्क नहीं कर रहे हो, अल्टीमेटली बी रेडी. सेक्शन 66 की ट्रांजेक्शंस जो है उसका कोई टाइम पीरियड नहीं, उसके लिए आप बहुत पीछे जा सकते हो, 10 साल पीछे भी जा सकते हो. सेक्शन 43, 45, 50 उनका टाइम पीरियड लिमिटेड है, 2 साल पीछे फ्रॉम द इनिशिएशन ऑफ द CIRP फॉर रिलेटेड ट्रांजैक्शंस, 1 ईयर पीछे फॉर अनरिलेटेड पार्टीज. लेकिन सेक्शन 66 हिट होते ही टाइम पीरियड की कोई लिमिट नहीं. Okay. Beneficiaries of any recoveries made during PUFE transactions. Who will be benefited out of these PUFE transactions की reporting से? अगर कोई भी asset या value which is recovered through the proceedings of avoidable transactions, they will become part of the liquidation estate. अगर liquidation portion में नहीं है, they will become part of the CD. And जब आप resolution plans call करोगे, तो they will be definitely going to the resolution application. Section 43. Property to be vested in the corporate debtor for all Section 43 transactions. Order can be passed for the property to be vested to the other party, to the RP or to the liquidator, depending on constant stage of situation. 47 and 49, restoring the position as it existed before the transaction. Status, Section 48, to be vested back to the CD. वापस पैसा वापस आना. Releasing or discharging of the security in trust which has been granted by the corporate debtor to the benefit of the, again the benefit will roll back to the corporate debtor. Restoring the position as it existed setting aside of the transaction. And section 66 make liable such contribution to the assets of the company. अगर आपने कोई ऐसा fraud किया है, आपने fraudulently company के पैसे को use किया है, and you've taken that money out of the organization, you will be liable to pool that money back into the company. What if the resolution plan is approved and the PUFE transaction lead to recovery? मतलब आपका resolution plan आ चुका है. It will absolutely be dependent on resolution plan की situation क्या है. क्या आप friends by 115th day identify कर चुके हो कि आपकी कौन से transactions PUFE transactions है और आपने कोर्ट में एक application लगा दिया. आप application section 43 में, section 45 में, 50 या 66 में लगा दो. उसके बाद आपने उसका status roll back करना ही करना है. तो resolution plan में resolution applicant क्या कह रहे हैं, वो आपको क्या बोल रहा है, क्या उसको ये सारे पैसे जो जितनी भी फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शंस हुई होंगी वो सारे जो पैसे हैं वो उसको जाएंगे या वो सीडी के पास आएंगे. तो ये उसके रेजोल्यूशन प्लान के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट होगा कि रेजोल्यूशन प्लान क्या कह रहे हैं. ओके, देन इफ द रेजोल्यूशन प्रोसेस नो इशू एज द कंटिंजेंट रिकवरी वुड बिकम पार्ट ऑफ द अगर लिक्विडेशन प्रोसेस में चले गए हो और उस पीरियड में ऑर्डर आता है तो वो लिक्विडेशन एस्टेट में आएगा. अगर रेजोल्यूशन प्लान है so we need to assure that such contingent recovery should not become part of the resolution plan as the resolution applicant has not factored the amount offered under the resolution plan. तो वो depend करेगा. मतलब as a RP it is your duty to ensure कि अगर आपको recovery के chances हैं and you want कि वो पैसा recover हो के आपके जो creditors हैं जिनको कम पैसे मिलेंगे waterfall में, क्योंकि resolution applicant जरूरी नहीं है friends कि आपके सारे creditors को pay करेगा. Resolution plan is dependent on a lot of other things also. बिजनेस का क्या स्टेटस है, क्या वायबिलिटी है, तो उसके बेसिस पे वो डिपेंड करके बताता है कि वो कितना कैश इनफ्लो लाएगा. 30 पैसा इन रुपी शायद देगा या 50 पैसा इन रुपी देगा, डिपेंडिंग ऑन द टाइप ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. RP can provide that a contingent recovery from PUF transactions, if any, would not be part of the assets of the corporate debtor and would not be part of the resolution plan. Resolution applicant can be told to add this clause in the resolution plan to ensure that the RA does not claim this amount later. The allocation of such contingent recovery amongst the creditors would also become part of the resolution plan. The obligation of the RP to be defined by handling the PUF transaction application pending before AA or any other. The RP is liable. He will not be relieved until and unless all these applications have been made, have been ordered, the costs have been identified. The cost of such litigation may also be provided in the CIRP cost, and definitely it does go into CIRP cost only because nobody can pay the litigation cost out of their own money on their own pockets. अपने फंड से नहीं होता. This absolutely is a part of the CIRP cost. Now preparing the application for the PUFE transactions. Friends, normally क्या होता है कि बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कि हमें एक combined application लगा देना चाहिए, कहीं तो फंस जाएगा. नहीं, never. It's always advisable to make separate applications for 43, 45, 50 and 66. Friends, intention का बहुत बड़ा रोल है. कोई चीजें फैक्चुअल होती हैं और कोई चीज इंटेंशन बेस्ड होती है. तो कहीं पे इंटेंशन बेस्ड लायबिलिटी अगर निकालनी होगी और वहां पर आपका फैक्ट क्लियर नहीं होगा तो you will end up losing the entire case, right? So the combined application should not be filed as the degree of examination in all the cases is different. The preferential transaction, the intent is not involved by virtue of legal fiction or deeming provision, whereas for undervalued transaction requires different inquiry under section 45 and 46, in which AA is required to examine the intent if such undervalued transactions are to defraud the creditors. Right? I told you the intention difference. Specific material facts are required to be pleaded if a transaction is sought to be brought under the mischief sought to be remedied by the sections of 43, 46 and 47 or section 66. A would have examined the aspect of preferential, undervalued and fraudulent separately and distinctly. Friends, मैंने ना इसमें काफी case laws add किए हैं and I'll share the PPT because मुझे 5:30 बजे खत्म करना है तो 2-4 चीजें और मुझे cover करनी है इसके अंदर. So we'll take अब अगर कोई questions होंगे राधिका, you can take them simultaneously if you have any queries.
Sure, ma'am. No, ma'am, not as of now.
Okay. Now, in case of Raman Agarwal versus Mohit Chadda, it's basically RP of JR Agrotech. इसमें क्या हुआ था फ्रेंड्स के NCLT में जो रूल्स हैं, प्रोविजंस हैं, उसके अंदर एप्लीकेशन जो थे वो इंसॉल्वेंसी मैटर्स के अंदर कवर होने होते, तो उसके लिए आपको एनक्लैट नहीं जाना होता. ये जो सेक्शन 43, 45, 47 and 50 and 66 ट्रांजेक्शन जो थे, इन सब की एप्लीकेशन एनसीएलटी में फाइल होती है और एनसीएलटी में आरपी ने एप्लीकेशन लगाई, उसके अगेंस्ट द प्रमोटर डायरेक्टर्स ऑफ द कंपनी दे वेंट टू एनक्लैट टू टेक एन एक्शन अगेंस्ट द आरपी। तो वहां पर एनक्लैट क्लियर कह दिया कि भाई अभी तुम्हारा एनसीएलटी में डिसीजन नहीं हुआ, you first go to NCLT, let NCLT decide about it, let the cases be discussed there, it is their jurisdiction, so we have to ensure that these transactions are filed at the NCLT level. In case of Anup Kumar, resolution professional of Messrs. Shiva Kala Developers Private Limited versus BDR Builders and Developers Private Limited, with single application was filed for all the transactions. Multiple allegations were entered for 2009 to 2010. Transactions found to be under normal business and with unrelated party. अब इस केस में क्या हुआ, थोड़ा सा इसमें गड़बड़ हो गई कि आरपी ने कंबाइंड एप्लीकेशन लगाई। फ्रेंड्स देखो, फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शंस के लिए आपके पास टाइम लिमिट नहीं है, आप बहुत पीछे जा सकते हैं, लेकिन 43, 45 ये तो टाइम बाउंड है, ये 2 साल से पीछे तो आप देख ही नहीं सकते। तो जो चीज लिमिटेशन से बाउंड है, जिसको लिमिटेशन एक्ट लग जाएगा, उस सिचुएशन के अंदर आप कवर ही नहीं होगे। आप 43 की एप्लीकेशन को 66 से मर्ज कर दोगे तो यू लूज द केस, बिकॉज आप 2 साल से पीछे जा ही नहीं सकते, राइट। सो वहां पर इंटेंशन 66 में फ्रॉडुलेंट इंटेंशन प्रूव करना बहुत जरूरी है, राइट। विच आर पॉइंट्स विच आर एसेंशियल टू बी पार्ट ऑफ द एप्लीकेशन। क्या चीजें आपको देखनी है? फैक्ट्स अबाउट सीआरपी और लिक्विडेशन प्रोसेस एंड कैपेसिटी इन विच एप्लीकेशन इज बीइंग मेड। Facts about CD, like line of activities, scale of activities, operations closed or not, financial position कैसी है, last 3 साल में क्या चल रहा है, losses हैं, cash losses हैं, depreciation losses हैं, किस तरह से वो situation चल रही है। Third, appointment of avoidable transactions, मतलब आप date of appointment क्या है, ड्राफ्ट रिपोर्ट लोगे आप, मतलब अवॉइडेबल ट्रांजैक्शंस का ऑडिटर अपॉइंट करोगे। अगर आप एज अ रेजोल्यूशन प्रोफेशनल खुद अपने आप में इतनी कैपेसिटी रखते हो कि आप उन ट्रांजैक्शंस को होल्ड आउट कर सको, आइडेंटिफाई कर सको, देन यू कैन डू इट ऑन योर ओन। अदरवाइज इट इज ऑलवेज एडवाइजेबल टू अपॉइंट अ ट्रांजैक्शनल ऑडिटर। फ्रेंड्स, ट्रांजैक्शनल ऑडिटर और फोरेंसिक ऑडिट में बहुत ज्यादा डिफरेंस आता है। फोरेंसिक ऑडिट नॉर्मली बिहेस्ट ऑफ द बैंक्स एंड बैंकर्स आप करते हो, वहां इंटेंशन कुछ और होता है। यहाँ पर ट्रांजैक्शन ऑडिट में आपने एक ट्रांजैक्शन जो पिछले 2 साल में हो रखी है, और अगर आपको उसमें कुछ इंडिकेशंस मिलते हैं कि कुछ फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शंस भी हो रहे हैं, तो आप और पीछे जाओगे। जस्ट टू आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट वर द रीजंस ऑफ दिस फेलियर ऑफ दिस बिजनेस, व्हाट वर द रीजंस ऑफ द इनिशिएशन ऑफ द CIRP, देन व्हाट वर द एफर्ट्स मेड बाय द आरपी और लिक्विडेटर फॉर कलेक्टिंग ऑफ द इंफॉर्मेशन। फ्रेंड्स, अगर आपको प्रमोटर्स डायरेक्टर्स कोऑपरेट नहीं कर रहे हैं, प्लीज डोंट वेट फॉर देम। सेक्शन 19 सबसेक्शन 2 ऑफ द IBC gives you an ample authority to file an application with the NCLT and seek specific directions कि आपको अगर कोई प्रमोटर डायरेक्टर किसी भी तरह की कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन लाइक बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स का डाटा नहीं दे रहा है, आपको इन्फॉर्मेशन नहीं प्रोवाइड कर रहा, लैंड एंड बिल्डिंग्स के रिकॉर्ड्स नहीं दे रहा है, he is not trying to hide a lot of information, you can always go under section 19 subsection 2 and seek specific direction. It's basically a court order can be taken against the defaulting people who are not cooperating with. And friends, RP ka work is not going to be easy. It is always difficult. Nobody is going to give you the information easily. It is you who has to use your interpersonal skills. It is you who has to use your technical skills to ensure you get all the data from the CD and also from the other sources like banks होंगे, आपके क्रेडिटर्स होंगे, आपके डेटर्स होंगे, जिनसे आप कंफर्म्ड कॉपी ऑफ अकाउंट मंगवा सकते हो, आप उनसे बिल्स की कॉपीज मंगवा सकते हो टू इंश्योर कि कहीं बोगस एंट्रीज नहीं हुए हैं, आपके बुक्स के अंदर कोई इनकरेक्ट एंट्री नहीं हो रखी है, एक्सटॉर्शनल ट्रांजैक्शंस नहीं हो रखे हैं। सो ऑल दिस यू हैव टू यूज, इट्स अ मैटर ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस एंड डेफिनेटली इट्स अ मैटर ऑफ योर आउट ऑफ बॉक्स थिंकिंग कि आपने कैसे चीजों को निकालना है वहां से। डेट ऑफ रिसीट ऑफ द ड्राफ्ट रिपोर्ट ऑफ द AT, आप बेसिकली देखो आपके पास 75th डे को आपको ओपिनियन बनाना शुरू करना है अबाउट दिस ट्रांजैक्शन, अबाउट दिस PUFE ट्रांजैक्शंस, एंड बाय 115th डे इट्स अ टाइम बाउंड मैनर। आपको मैंने जैसे शुरू से बोला है कि IBC इज अ टाइम बाउंड, इट्स अ क्लॉक व्हिच इज टिकिंग ऑल द टाइम। 180 डेज का टाइम स्लॉट है आपके पास, उसके अंदर आपको रिजॉल्व भी करना है, आपको फ्रॉडुलेंट ट्रांजैक्शंस को ढूंढना भी है, आपको साइफंड पैसों को भी वापस लाना है। सो इट्स something which you have to do a lot of things simultaneously. It's a multitasking kind of a thing. Then, what was the responses received from the corporate debtor or the suspended directors, because you'll be writing and confronting them कि ये information चाहिए या वो डाटा चाहिए या यहाँ से information चाहिए. कोर्ट केसेस अगर चल रहे हैं तो you will take information from the lawyers also. जो कॉर्पोरेट के lawyers होंगे उनसे भी आप information लोगे कि कोर्ट के proceedings अगर कोई चल रहे हैं तो किस stage पे हैं and what were the documents which were given while taking those proceedings. When and how the transactions were determined by the RP. मतलब आपको देखिए as a RP you again have to create a trail कि कैसे मैंने ढूंढा कि preferential transaction. What were the documental evidences which indicated or which were giving you indications कि fraudulent transactions भी हो सकती हैं. So वो reasons for delay in determination of transactions. Again अगर आपकी 19(2) की application लगी है, आपके पास information ही कोई नहीं आई, कहीं से कुछ नहीं मिला, बैंक वालों से भी कोई information नहीं आई, डायरेक्टर प्रमोटर से कोई information नहीं आई, तो फिर तो ultimately your time slot will stop. The घड़ी will stop for that time period जितनी देर तक आपको information नहीं मिली. Difficulties faced in collecting of the information and status of applications filed under 19(2). As I told you friends, 19(2) is a section which is jaldi sunwai hoti hai, or courts are also, you can push the registrar for listing of the matters on priority basis because these are priority matters actually. Information collected on transactions which are found by the RP or liquidator before or after the report of the avoidable transactions auditor. ATA की report के बाद भी आपके पास कोई information आ सकती है. So friends, till the process is completed in the form of a liquidation order coming and the company getting bound up and resolved in total, so this information will keep on coming to you, and as and when the information comes, you can start adding addendums to your existing applications. Section 43 में आपने basically मैंने एक छोटा सा brief draft बनाया है. I'll make sure I end up on time. 43 के अंदर आपको transaction देना है, period 1 साल या 2 साल, प्रॉपर्टी की डिटेल, जो इंफॉर्मेशन आपने ली वो सारा कुछ आप एप्लीकेशन के अंदर डालोगे. फिर आप आइडेंटिफाई करोगे कि ये बेनिफिशियल क्रेडिटर है जिससे मुझे रिलीफ चाहिए और आप चाहते क्या हो, है ना. आपने डॉक्यूमेंटल एविडेंसेस दे दिए कि ये सब डॉक्यूमेंट्स मुझे चाहिए, आपने लिए और उसके बेसिस पे एक सेक्शन 43 की एप्लीकेशन बनाई. उसमें आप सारे बैंक अकाउंट्स, बिल्स, बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स, ऑडिटेड बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स, ऑडिटेड कॉपी ऑफ अकाउंट्स, ये सब आप अटैच करोगे. And then the court will decide whether this is a preferential transaction or not. लेकिन ये सारी information friends section 43 की application के अंदर आप डालोगे, all the information जो भी आपने लिया उसका audit trail के साथ. And then bottom में आप ये mention करोगे भैया आपको relief चाहिए क्या, आप वो asset को roll back चाहते हो, आप ये चाहते हो कि पैसा recover किया जाए, आप ये चाहते हो कि personal assets of the person can be tapped up depending क्या information आपको मिली है, आप ये सब कुछ उसमें seek. What petition, what relief do you want the court to give to you? That you will give. Similarly, section 45. Friends, जैसे मैं आपको बार-बार बोल रही हूँ, आपको ये buckets को categorically identify करना है. 43 की bucket की अलग कहानी है, 45 की bucket की अलग कहानी है, 47, 49 and 66 ये सब की कहानियां अलग-अलग है. इन सब के conditions अलग-अलग हैं. तो ये जो conditions हैं, वो आपको on tips रहने चाहिए. गलत application will end up for you getting a blunt from them, getting a bash from the NCLT. Similar application undervalued transactions की होगी. आपने हर चीज जो कर रहे हो, देखो फ्रेंड्स, डॉक्यूमेंट्स हमें आपने आर्टिकलशिप में भी सिखाया जाता है कि भैया डॉक्यूमेंट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, ऑडिट ट्रेल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. अगर आपने अपने आप को सब्सटेंशिएट करना है, आपको कोर्ट ऑफ लॉ में प्रूव करना है, तो आपके डॉक्यूमेंट्स जो हैं दे आर द वंस व्हिच आर गोइंग टू हेल्प यू. सो अगर आपकी एप्लीकेशन के साथ आपने क्या ट्रांजैक्शन को आइडेंटिफाई किया, उसका क्या डॉक्यूमेंटल एविडेंस उसके साथ लगाया, थर्ड पार्टी एविडेंसेस लगाओगे व्हिच विल बी मच मोर एप्रिशिएटेड देन दी सेल्फ डॉक्यूमेंट्स, राइट. ये मैं आई विल शेयर दी पीपीटी. दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच इज ड्राफ्ट कि ये चीजें की पॉइंट्स हैं जो आपको अपनी एप्लीकेशन के अंदर जरूर मेंशन करने हैं. किसने इंफॉर्मेशन दी, उसकी क्या अथॉरिटी थी. आप किसी क्लर्क के कहने पे, किसी डायरेक्टर की मैनेजरियल पर्सन की कही हुई बात को आप दोनों को कट करना है ना, अगर तो जो क्लर्क कह रहा है और जो केएमपी कह रहा है उन दोनों की वेटेज का फर्क है. जिसके पास जो अथॉरिटी है वो उस अथॉरिटी से बोलता है, उस अथॉरिटी के साथ वो डॉक्यूमेंटल एविडेंसेस अकॉर्डिंगली देता है, राइट. A clerk might not be aware of lot of other transactions which a key managerial person would be aware, right friends. So ये अपने को उसका ध्यान देना है. ये मैंने आपको बता ही दिया है कि ट्रांजैक्शन सेक्शन 66 में होती है, उसमें देयर इज नेवर एवर अ टाइम पीरियड लिमिट. Section 6, and then there are judgments, right? Friends, at the outset, I would just like to quickly grasp it out. I think judgments can be, you can read all the judgments. ये बहुत सारी detailed judgments हैं जो liquidator के benefit में आई हैं, जो के RP के benefit में आई हैं. Courts ने जो preferential transactions थी उनको roll back किया है और उनको roll back करके complete transactions का security interest है तो roll back कर दिया या उसकी recovery के orders कर दिए. And friends, इसमें personal अगर gains किसी के भी हो रखे हैं, उनके पर्सनल एसेट्स की अटैचमेंट तक की प्रोविजंस हैं. उनके पर्सनल एसेट्स से रिकवरी करने के लिए उनके एसेट्स को आप एक्ट, यू कैन आस्क द कोर्ट, ये पर्सन फॉरेन भागना चाह रहा है तो आप उनके प्रमोटर्स, डायरेक्टर्स और डिफ्रॉडिंग जो ऑफिसर्स हैं उन सबके पासपोर्ट्स को भी कॉन्फिस्केट करवा सकते हैं. यू कैन मेक श्योर दैट दे डोंट लीव द कंट्री. बट फ्रेंड्स, अगेन, ये सब आप कब कर पाओगे? ये सब आप तब कर पाओगे अगर आप इनको टाइमली आइडेंटिफाई करोगे, टाइमली देखोगे कि ये सब कुछ हो रहा है और ये फ्रॉड हो रहा है या यहाँ पर कुछ गड़बड़ हो रहा है, फिशी हो रहा है, और आपको उन पर्सन्स को रोकना है. टाइमली एक्शन लिया हुआ आपको यहाँ पर हेल्प करेगा. इन सब ऑर्डर्स के अंदर ये त्रिमुला बालाजी लॉयर्स प्राइवेट लिमिटेड में सुमित बिनानी सर के केस के अंदर प्रेफरेंशियल ट्रांजैक्शंस के लिए भी उन्होंने रोल बैक करवा दिया था. जो डेट ऑफ सीआरपी थी वही डेट ऑफ सीआरपी मानी गई, उसी के पीछे के ट्रांजैक्शंस को चेक करना. इसके अलावा फ्रेंड्स, आईपीसी के अंदर सेक्शंस 421, 22, 23 और 24, मतलब इवन आईपीसी आल्सो प्रोवाइड्स कि अगर आपकी कोई इस तरह की डिफॉल्टिंग ट्रांजैक्शंस हुई हैं, कोई बंदे ने डिफ्रॉड किया है, फ्रॉड से आपके पैसे को साइफन किया है, तो उसके अगेंस्ट अलोंग विद एन एप्लीकेशन अंडर एनसीएलटी आप एप्लीकेशन जो लगाओगे रिकवरी प्रोसीडिंग्स के लिए, आपसे आईपीसी के अंदर भी आप उसको लायबल कर सकते हैं, राइट? Another very important document which was given lately, 2 महीने पहले ये डॉक्यूमेंट आया है, which is a joint paper by all the insolvency professional agencies. जो हमारी 3 IPAs हैं, ट्रिपल IP ICAI, ट्रिपल IP ICSI, कंपनी सेक्रेटरीज का जो वो पेरेंट बॉडी है, और कॉस्ट एंड वर्क्स अकाउंटेंट्स की जो पेरेंट बॉडी है, उन IPAs ने मिलकर एक सैंपल बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस का पेपर निकाला है, जिसमें उन्होंने रेजोल्यूशन प्रोफेशनल और लिक्विडेटर के रोल को क्लियरली आइडेंटिफाई किया है कि what are the important things, what are the points which you have to ensure, and what are the methods by which you can actually extract the information, what are the methods in which the information can be put to use. So this joint paper, friends, all of you must read and understand how this entire process works and what are your responsibilities on that. इसके मैंने benchmark points को identify कर दिया है, and I think that brings me to the end of my session. And again, I thank you everybody for the patient hearing. And Balveer sir, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity of coming to this dais and sharing this platform and putting up transactions which are very, very important for everybody to understand. And friends, I see IBC coming up as a boon to the industry, because a lot of organizations which are facing financial difficulties and crunches are given this window to actually take a exit, take a clean exit. For organizations who need to run who have the experience and willingness to run the organization. So it's a window for them to take up organization, easy financing and funding financing हो सकती है. आपको बहुत अच्छी organizations at a very low cost मिल जाती है, because averagely as of now जो basic cut off rate of waterfall में हमारा जो haircut आ रहा है वो 40-45% haircut तो सभी cases में आ ही रहा है. So this is again an opportunity wherein you can explore, क्योंकि आपके पास कई ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल ऐसे रिक्वायरमेंट्स हो सकते हैं जहां फंडिंग फाइनेंसिंग के लिए वो कहते हैं कि हमें ऐसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन दे दीजिए जो बनी हुई है, जो ऑलरेडी रनिंग है. सो आई विल शेयर अ सिंपल एग्जांपल विद यू. आई वाज अपॉइंटेड एज आरपी इन अ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन व्हिच वाज रनिंग एज अ इलेक्ट्रिक पैनल कंपनी. सो व्हेन आई वाज अपॉइंटेड आई गॉट लॉट ऑफ मेल्स फ्रॉम अदर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हु वर विलिंग टू टेक ओवर दैट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, बिकॉज उनको एक लगी लगाई फैक्ट्री मिल जाती है जो कि स्ट्रेस में है, एंड दे हैव द ट्रिक to run that stressed organization in a better manner. So it's absolutely ending up in a very, very fruitful and very productive manner. And PIRP जो आ चुका है, which is pre-pack insolvency, this is again a window wherein a lot of defaulter people who are willing to take a fresh start can go in for PIRP also. So that brings me to the end of the session. Thank you so much for patient hearing. Over to you, Radhika, for the next session.
Ma'am, Pooja ma'am, there are questions for you.
Yeah.
The first one is how to trace this fraudulent transaction in real life.
How to trace
a fraudulent transaction in real life.
Absolutely. That's something Radhika is based on facts and documents on record. Friends, whenever we are very good at reading balance sheets, friends. आप जब भी कोई balance sheet read करते हैं, you study the books of accounts, you go through the ledger accounts, you are able to identify easily as to what transaction apparently appears to be a good document. आपके पास एक प्रॉपर इंटरनल कंट्रोल का सिस्टम का ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का पैटर्न है आपके पास. आपको पता है कि एक रिक्वेजिशन स्लिप आती है, उस रिक्वेजिशन स्लिप के बाद ऑर्डर प्लेस किया जाता है, ऑर्डर प्लेसमेंट के बाद गेट पास एंट्री होती है जब भी गुड्स इन होती है. सो एक ट्रांजैक्शन के साथ एसोसिएटेड 10 ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं, तो 10 में से कोई भी चीज छूट रही है तो वो इट्स एन इंडिकेटर कि यहाँ पर कुछ फिशी है. तो वहां आपका पेन रुक जाता है ना. जब आप ऑडिट करने जाते हो, आप निकालते हो कि संडेज को कितनी ट्रांजेक्शंस हुए, बिलिंग जो कि संडे को होती नहीं है, हॉलीडेज को कितनी बिलिंग हुई. दिस आर समथिंग व्हिच यू यूज योर ऑडिट टूल्स टू आइडेंटिफाई व्हाट ट्रांजैक्शंस आर कमिंग अप, व्हाट ट्रांजैक्शंस आर इन द नॉर्मल पैरेलल्स ऑफ द बिजनेस एंड व्हाट ट्रांजैक्शंस आर अपेयरिंग टू बी एक्सॉर्बिएंट ट्रांजैक्शंस. आपके पास 10 सप्लायर्स हैं, 10 सप्लायर्स के सामने आपके पास लिस्ट है कि ये बेंचमार्क रेट है, तो इजीली आइडेंटिफाइबल है. अगर आपने उस बेंचमार्क को तोड़ा वो फ्रॉड है, राइट? सो इट्स बेसिकली reading the books of account, understanding the books of account and the associated documents and the other whole lot of things we use to record the books of accounts. तो वो सारी चीजें आपको इन टोटो देखनी है, तभी आपको समझ में आएगा कि फ्रॉड हुआ है या नहीं हुआ.
Very well said. The next one is Section 66G, frauding intention. No time limit for such transactions.
Yeah.
But how to prove it that the transaction is fraudulent? So how do you decide about the look back period in case of fraudulent transaction for transaction audit purpose?
Exactly. Friends, prima facie आप प्री इंटेंशन से नहीं जाते कि ये जो डॉक्यूमेंट है ये हमारा फ्रॉडुलेंट में आएगा. आप सोचते हो कि 2 साल तक की ट्रांजेक्शन चेक करेंगे. ट्रांजेक्शन ऑडिटर भी इसी व्यू से जाता है, लेकिन चेकिंग करते हुए आपके हाथ में आती है ट्रेल ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शंस, जिसके लिए आपको लुक बैक करना पड़ता है. इसका सिंपल सा मैं एग्जांपल देती हूँ. आपने एक लैंड, आप एक रियल एस्टेट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हो, ठीक है जी. आपने रियल एस्टेट में ही सारी इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करी हुई. आपके 5 प्रोजेक्ट्स चल रहे हैं. उन 5 प्रोजेक्ट्स में आपका नॉर्मली आपका प्राइमा फेसी सब दिख रहा है कि आप बनाते हो और आप अपनी पोजीशन दे देते हो. कोई 2 प्रोजेक्ट्स ऐसे हैं जो कि आपने बहुत देर पहले लिए थे और उसमें फंडिंग फाइनेंसिंग करी थी, और उस फंडिंग फाइनेंसिंग में सिस्टर कंसर्न से लोन आ रहा है, और वो सबऑर्डिनेट जो सब्सिडरी कंपनी है जिसमें लैंड परचेज्ड है, जहां पर आपको लोन मिला हुआ है, उसमें आप पोजेशन नहीं दे रहे. ठीक है, ये समथिंग विच यू विल लर्न इफ यू गो बैक 5 years बैक. ये आपको पहले 2 साल में नहीं दिख रहा. पहले 2 साल सब कुछ ठीक दिख रहा है, एवरीथिंग इज गुड, एंड देन यू सी कि कोई ट्रांजेक्शन है जो रोल बैक करके बार बार हिट कर रही है 4 years बैक, 5 years बैक. तो फ्रेंड्स, आप उसको एक बार चेक करोगे. अगर आपको कोई रेड फ्लैग दिखता है तो आपका इंटेंशन होगा उसको चेक करना, वो फ्रॉडुलेंट है या नहीं है, वो एक्चुअली सेक्शन 66 में कवरेबल है या नहीं है. ये आप उसको चेक करने के बाद बता सकते हैं. प्राइमा फेसी मैं जैसे बोलती हूँ ना, हम ऑडिट करने जाते हैं तो हम कोई प्री कंसीव नोशन से नहीं जाते, लेकिन ड्यूरिंग द कोर्स ऑफ ऑडिट you get hold of such transactions which are back and again hitting to 5 years back or 4 years back. So you as a transaction auditor will first check कि वो 4 साल पहले या 5 साल पहले हुआ क्या था, राइट? अब आपने साइफनिंग ऑफ फंड्स ढूंढने, क्रेडिटर्स खड़े हैं, डेटर्स खड़े हैं, आपके पास 6 महीने से पुराने डेटर्स खड़े हैं. आपने हर साल आप जो भी परचेज सेल करते हो 2 करोड़ की आपने सेल करी, और उसमें से आपके 1 करोड़ 80 लाख के डेटर्स खड़े, और आप कह रहे हो कि जी ये सारे के सारे जो डेटर्स है ना, ये मेरे 6 महीने से कम वाले हैं, और 6 महीने से कोविड का अटैक के कारण, कोरोना के कारण आपकी कोई बिलिंग नहीं है. तो ये तो फ्रॉड है ना भाई, ये तो फ्रॉड है, ये एक्चुअल फ्रॉड है. जब आपको पता है कि फैक्ट्स एंड सर्कमस्टांसेस, जो स्टेटमेंट्स आपको दी जा रही हैं, डायरेक्टर कुछ कह रहे हैं, फाइनेंस का डायरेक्टर कुछ कह रहा है, और प्रोडक्शन डायरेक्टर कुछ कह रहे हैं, तो अगर आपको ऐसी एनोमिटीज मिलती हैं, ऐसी कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी स्टेटमेंट्स मिलती हैं, कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी डॉक्यूमेंट्स मिलते हैं, तो फ्रेंड्स, इट इज योर ड्यूटी टू लुक बैक फॉर अ पीरियड बियॉन्ड 2 years टू आइडेंटिफाई देम. आप चेक करोगे तो पता चलेगा कि फ्रॉड हुआ कि नहीं. अगर आप चेक ही नहीं करोगे, आप सोचते हो कि नहीं मुझे 2 साल पीछे देखना ही नहीं, लेकिन आपको रेड फ्लैग्स हैं, आपको इंडिकेटर्स आ रहे हैं कि आपकी जो परचेज है वो बार बार एक पार्टी से होती है, लेकिन पेमेंट हमेशा उसको डिले होती है. लेकिन अभी सीआरपी इनिशिएशन से पहले फटाफट से पेमेंट हो रही थी, बहुत ज्यादा पेमेंट हो रही थी, डेटर्स के सेट ऑफ्स हो रहे थे, या क्रेडिटर्स और डेटर्स आपस में सेट ऑफ ही होते जा रहे थे, पेमेंट किसी को हो ही नहीं रही थी. तो फ्रेंड्स, अगर ऐसे इंडिकेटर्स और रेड फ्लैग्स आपको बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स में दिख रहे हैं, तो आई वुड ऑलवेज सजेस्ट यू लुक बैक फॉर अ पीरियड बियॉन्ड 2 years टू आइडेंटिफाई. लेकिन आप कहते हो, आपका क्वेश्चन ये था बेसिकली कि आप ये कैसे ढूंढोगे कि डीफ्रॉडिंग है. तो अगर आप ऐसी ट्रांजैक्शंस कर रहे हो और बैंक को पे नहीं कर रहे हो, तो आपका इंटेंशन है क्या? अगर आप बार बार ऐसी ट्रांजैक्शंस कर रहे हो, डेटर्स क्रेडिटर्स को सेट ऑफ कर रहे हो या अनसिक्योर्ड लोन्स को पे कर रहे हो, अगर आपका इंटेंशन टू डीफ्रॉड द क्रेडिटर नहीं है, तो और क्या इंटेंशन है? या तो फिर वो पॉजिटिव इंटेंशन हमको समझाओ ना, राइट? सो दिस इज एब्सोल्युटली फ्रेंड जजमेंटल एंड बेस्ड ऑन फैक्ट्स एंड सर्कमस्टांसेस ऑफ द केस. जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स आपके पास आ रहे हैं, जो इंडिकेटर्स आपके पास आ रहे हैं, जो रेड फ्लैग्स आपको दिख रहे हैं, वो आपको बताएंगे कि ये फ्रॉडुलेंट इंटेंशन डीफ्रॉडिंग क्रेडिटर्स है या नहीं. जी राधिका.
Ma'am, the next question is whether RT can rely on the reports received from the forensic transaction auditor or he has to take his own decision?
Friends, liability आपकी अपनी है, लेकिन हाँ, you can rely on that report. बट अगर आपको उसकी रिपोर्ट को भी अच्छे से पढ़ना है, प्राइमा फेसी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी आपकी है. आपकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थोड़ी सी कम हो जाती है अगर आप एक प्रोफेशनल हेल्प ले लेते हो. इट इज शेयर्ड, लाइबिलिटी इज शेयर्ड, बट अल्टीमेटली लाइबिलिटी आपकी है, कॉल आपका अपना होना चाहिए. आपको उस रिपोर्ट को अच्छे से पढ़ना चाहिए. अगर उसमें नॉर्मलिटीज दिख रही हैं तो यू कैन ऑलवेज ऑब्जेक्ट टू दैट फोरेंसिक ऑडिटिंग आल्सो.
Ma'am, what is advisable to appoint forensic auditor or transaction auditor?
Transaction auditor. We are not doing anything like forensic audit in CRP proceedings. CRP proceedings is absolutely transaction audit.
And the last one is how to deal with the disclaimer done by the auditor.
Disclaimer done by the
auditor, the auditors of the firm.
Disclaimer, देखो, मेरे को बहुत सारे फ्रॉड्स दिख रहे हैं और मैंने क्वालिफाइड रिपोर्ट नहीं दी, तो उस डिस्क्लेमर का कोई फायदा नहीं. मैं ये भी बोलूं कि मेरा ट्रू एंड फेयर व्यू है बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट में, और मैं ये भी बोलूं कि डेटर्स क्रेडिटर्स subject to confirmation. We do not know anything about the debtors. We do not know anything about the creditors. We do not know what is the value of the stock. We do not know what are the cash balances. And still we are giving a true and fair view. You cannot give a true and fair. You have to give a qualified report. If the auditor has given a qualified report and it is an indicator that the entire process has been properly, audit process has been properly done, qualification has been done, and that qualification of that audit report was a whistleblower, so it's absolutely fine. We can rely on the auditor and disclaimer is absolutely acceptable. लेकिन अगर आप ये बोल दो कि मुझे कुछ नहीं मिला, मुझे किसी ने कैश बुक नहीं दी, मुझे किसी ने बिल्स नहीं दिए, मुझे परचेज के बिल्स नहीं दिए, मुझे सेल के बिल्स नहीं दिए, मैंने फिर भी ऑडिट रिपोर्ट दे दी, भैया तुम्हें क्यों दी ऑडिट रिपोर्ट विद अ डिस्क्लेमर? गिव अ क्वालिफाइड रिपोर्ट, राइट इट अपफ्रंटली, ब्लंटली लिखो. आप ऑडिटर हो, आप गोलमोल करके बात नहीं कर सकते हो. यू हैव टू बी स्ट्रेट एंड आपको स्ट्रेट ऑन द फेस बोलना है कि ये गलत रिपोर्ट है, ये गलत बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स है, ये फ्रॉडलेंट बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स है, बोगस बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स है. राइट इट डाउन क्लियरली एंड लाउडली.
We end this questioning session here. Thank you, Pooja ma'am. I must say that it was a very knowledgeable session.
Thank you.
Now, I would like to invite the Vice Chairman of Jodhpur branch of ICAI, CA Dhaval Kothari ji, to please take over and extend the formal vote of thanks to CA Pooja Trikhama. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, CA Radhika Goyal ji, for giving me a chance for vote of thanks. Good evening to all. On behalf of Jodhpur branch of CRC of ICAI and CPE committee of ICAI, give a really heartfelt vote of thanks to our speaker, CA Pooja Trikhama ma'am, who spent his busiest time and enlightened us on PUFE transaction under IBC. Today we had the opportunity to hear you and your thoughts about PUFE transactions. We learned that we have to follow proper due diligence while analyzing all these transactions. we have to make proper documentations. Thank you, ma'am, once again. Thank you, CA Radhika Goyalji. Now, with these words, over to you.
Thank you, Dhaval. Thank you, Dhaval. Now, let's move forward to the second part of the webinar. For that, I would like to invite our managing committee members of Jodhpur branch of the IRC of ICAI, CA Amit Jain sir, to formally introduce our next speaker. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Radhika. Good evening to all. I would like to introduce the speakers of the next session on the role of the chartered accountants and the valuers in advising the startups and negotiating with the investors. Okay, I see Pranav and Mayank. So good young chartered accountants. I would like to start with Pranav first. Pranav is a qualified chartered accountant, and he's involved in executing the statutory tax audits and the statutory and the tax audits of the various clients across industries. He was part of the World Bank and the Global Fund Management as a local fund agent hand. He has also completed a couple of courses. Besides being a law graduate, he has also completed the NDS course from the ICAI. He has also done indirect taxes certificate course from ICAI and has done independent director examination from IBVI. And to add a feather to his cap, he has also authored the practice manual of the independent director examination. So, and he's also done DISA from the ICAI. So, being young, I mean, a lot of degrees in his hand, and showing the good path. Okay, now moving on, I would like to introduce the second speaker of the today's session, CA Mayank Makkar. Mayank has a post-qualification experience of around 9 years. He's a graduate from the Delhi University. He's actively participating in the various large MNCs and the big Indian clients in structuring their operations in India in a tax-efficient manner. And he's also advising on the company law and the FEMA compliances. Mayank guides his clients through their personal finance portfolios and assist in succession planning. He has also completed the registered valuers course and has also done 2 levels of the CFA conducted by the CFA Institute. So that was a brief introduction of both the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Over to you, Radhika.
I'll give the stage to our next speakers. Over to you, CF Pranav Goyalji and CM Mayank Makkar. Over to you, please.
Sure. Thank you. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Are we active? Are we ready? We're not sleepy, right?
No,
I
we are all active.
Everyone. I want to see everyone. How many people in the room around? I can see 10 people. So
we have almost 1,000 viewers on ICAI side. Yeah.
Awesome. 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 So good evening, everyone. The topic for today's webinar is the role of CAs in advising startups and negotiating with investors. But before we move on to that, I would like to talk about the life cycle of a company. I would like to dedicate this webinar to my guru, Dr. Ashwath Damodaran, without whom I would not be discussing valuations with you. And also like to personally thank Ritesh Agarwal, founder of Oyo, Asia's youngest billionaire, for his deep insights, without whom this webinar would have been possible. So I would like to name this section companies bhi budi hoti hain. You know, it's not an artificial person. So just like a human being is born as an infant, then he grows into an adolescent, then he becomes a young working individual, then he becomes a middle-aged person, and finally he grows old in exactly the same way. A company also gets born, then matures, grows old, and finally dies. The Dean calls it the various stages of a corporate life cycle. Company पैदा होती है, जवान होती है, mature होती है, बूढ़ी होती है और मरती भी है. So the valuation of a company changes at each stage, from a newborn company to a middle-aged company, then to an old declining company. As a company moves through various life stages, its value does tend to change and shift. जब भी हम valuations की बात करते हैं, हम हमेशा Excel sheets की बात करते हैं. Whenever we talk about valuations, we talk about Excel sheets. But a good valuation is never done on only an Excel sheet. A good valuation always has a story embedded in it. Stories to numbers. That's what we valuers do. And one of the things I want to talk about is the balance between these stories and numbers. They change when you go, the company goes from a young company to a mature company, then to an older company. Whenever we do a valuation, we always look at the business balance sheet and never an accounting balance sheet. A business balance sheet is drastically different from an accounting balance sheet. In a business balance sheet, you have to look at those assets which are not appearing in the books of accounts. These are called growth assets. Growth assets, which are presently, not in the books, but the company shall build and generate and develop over the future years. And on the liability side, there is primarily debt and equity. So as I talked about the corporate life cycle of the company, so the first stage, the infant, the company paida hoti hai, so you will talk about startups, right? Startups. So there are many startups. Like Khata Book, for example. Khata Book has raised a total of $200 million in funding over 5 rounds. Their latest funding was raised on 24th August 2021, Series C round. Khata Book is funded by 34 investors. Tencent and Better Capital are the most recent investors. Now, this is almost a zero revenue company. You have to understand this, but it's valued at $600 million because it's targeting the micro SMEs in especially tier 2 and tier 3 cities. ये कंपनी कर क्या रही है? कंपनी खाता बुक है जो आपके हिसाब है, जिसमें आपके हिसाब है, छोटे दुकानदार जो अपने खाते और हिसाब लिखते हैं, बनाते हैं, वो ऐप पे कर रहे हैं. एंड दिस ऐप इज सेंडिंग पेमेंट रिमाइंडर्स टू ऑल इट्स वेंडर्स. सो अ ब्रिलियंट आइडिया. दे सॉ अ गैप, right? TikTok was very popular in all these small tier cities, but there was no good utility app. So you have to understand, this is a startup, zero revenue company, just born, but it's valued at $600 million. Now we come to the next stage, young growth. जब हम स्कूल और कॉलेज में होते हैं, हम कितनी बेवकूफियां करते हैं, right? So उसी तरह ये companies like Cred, Paytm, they do incredibly stupid things. If you want to make it from a startup to a young growth company are like adolescents, they will do incredibly stupid things without thinking or bothering about the consequences. So when you have companies like Cred, like 1MG, like Paytm, primarily all those companies which are funded, VC funded, and as they're trying to create a market and a gap perception in the minds of the consumers, these companies have steady top line but are cash negative. They have heavy cash burns acquiring more customers. So they can also be doing stupid things which they might not be required to do, but their future is full of potential. So young companies like these tend to be money losing. They have small revenues and huge reinvestment needs. They tend to have negative cash flows. In fact, these negative cash flows are often described as cash burns, right? And as young companies mature, their operating margins turn positive. The reinvestment starts to drop off and they start to scale off significantly. So अब coming to the third stage कि अब कॉलेज खत्म और नौकरी शुरू. So ऐसी कंपनीज है like Zerodha, रात को 3 बजे सोकर भी सुबह 6 बजे they are ready for work, मतलब full on party time. So after the adolescent age, you've got young growth companies, the young workforce of India. This is when you're at the peak of your glory. This is when you go to sleep at 3 o'clock in the night and wake up at 6 and still function. These are companies like Zerodha, amazing cash flows and still continue to grow. These are young growth companies which are cash flow positive. Nykaa, these companies are young growth, they're growing and cash flow positive. So that's the stages that you need to understand when you're valuing a company. कि आपकी company किस stage में है, So next, coming on to the next one, stage 4, mature growth. So अब bachelor life खत्म, बेटा शादी कर लो. So then comes what we call are the middle age and mature companies like our fathers. These companies have stable, more mature revenues. Companies like Asian Paints, ITC, Britannia, Marico, etc. All these companies have stable and sustainable business models, which generate huge volumes of cash. So this is your mature growth. Now, mature growth and mature stable is something fine line between them. So I will move on to the stage 6 ki ab main retire ho gaya. You know, this comes to the final phase that nobody wants to be then. When you are in decline, the more mature people in the audience, sabko pata hai, LML scooter ka naam sabne suna hai, you know, LML Star Express. Such a, you know, iconic scooter, but our LML has gone into liquidation because they did not venture into motorcycles. BPL एक और company है, you know, they brought colored televisions in the homes of the Indian people during the Asian Games. That company is dead now. Who can forget Ambassador, Hindustan Motors, right? The car of the politicians, the car which was a status symbol for all Indians. That company has shut down. So company पैदा होती है, company mature होती है, बूढ़ी होती है और company मरती भी है. So companies are born, they mature, they decline. It's the nature. It's a natural process. So whenever you see the company is an artificial person as a valuer, I will totally disagree with that. And if you think a company falls in the process, when you can already start thinking and now how this company should be run, what it should be doing, and how to value these companies. So if you think about what causes this process to evolve, so here's a way to think about it. So some businesses are easy to enter and scale up. They don't require huge amount of infrastructure investment like Paytm, you know, like Khata Book. They don't require decades of building up. You can grow quickly. Some businesses take much longer to build up. They say like ITC, you know, companies like Britannia, like decades old. They took 100 years to mature. Now they're maturing. This Bombay Dyeing, you know, Marico. These companies are old. So a tech company will grow in dog years, right? Whereas a manufacturing company will grow normally. So a tech company will take 10 years to reach where a manufacturing company would reach at the same stage in 50 years. So the 10 participants that are there with me, I would like to play a game with you guys if you are up for it. Can I please ask you to participate in this small game? Hello. Amit sir, are you there? Radhika?
Actually, over here there are 9 participants and the others are not on live vote. They are from the CA platform. So ICAI live platform. I'll ask Ajit sir. Ajit sir.
Okay, so I can move on if the participation is not there. So just to give you an idea, Radhika, even you can participate in this. You know Nykaa, right? Okay. Nykaa. So I'll tell you the story of Nykaa. So understand, see, stories to numbers is what valuations is. Valuations is not about Excel sheet. So understand what problem Falguni Nair solved. Falguni Nair was the most sought after name in the investment banking world. She was the head of Kotak. And one day, while pampering herself at the best salon in India in Oberoi, Mumbai, she asked for the right nail paint shade. You know, she couldn't find it. Nobody could find it for her. So that made her wonder that if this is the condition of the best salon in India, what is the condition of Indian women in general? This is how Nykaa was born in 2012. She resigned from Kotak. It was a fantastically well-paying job. You know, she was heading investment banking division there, but she saw a big problem. She was 52 at that time, you know, and she left a very comfortable and a high-paying job. So while researching the industry, she saw that the biggest problem in cosmetic companies is that the majority of the products expire even before they reach the customers, you know, because cosmetic companies were making huge size bottles or packs. There was a major problem. She went to MAC, Sephora, Victoria's Secrets, you know, and literally forced them to make miniatures of their products, you know, so that Indian women could afford to buy these products. But there was a different strategy behind it. The small miniatures idea was so good, you know, it was so good that it increased the sales of these cosmetic companies drastically, right? So it was a win-win for everyone. These cosmetic giants were forced to follow her idea globally, and this made Falguni Nair the hero in the cosmetic business. You know, small bottles, you know, more sales, less wastage, smart, isn't it? Today, Nykaa is having 40% market share. You know, it's a marketplace for 1,000 brands. You know, from zero revenue, it's 2,400 crores. So, Radhika, you tell me at which stage do you see Nykaa? Is it a startup? Is it a young growth? Is it a high growth? Is it a mature growth, mature, stable, or decline? Please. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please.
Actually, there was some network issue. Yeah, what were you asking? Please.
So Nykaa falls under which stage? So let me.
I think it's in the high growth stage, stage 3.
And why do you say so?
Because it's doing pretty well. I mean, I personally search on Nykaa only, and it has all the brands, and it is on incorporating the luxury brands also, and all sort of brands. So I think it's in the growth stage, the high growth stage.
Correct answer. Now coming to Vodafone Idea, Radhika.
Vodafone is on the stage, the old stage. It is getting depleted. The network is giving a lot of problems. We don't get calls. I think it's in the mature, the old stage, the declining stage.
And who was responsible for that?
I think the merger with the Idea company. The moment they did a merger, they were like, what I feel is they couldn't live up to the expectations of the customers.
And who else? Who else was responsible for the downfall of Vodafone India? Come on. It's a very easy answer.
You tell me.
Jio.
I think, yes, the Jio, the network of Jio is pretty good. Wherever you go, the network is there. Vodafone, I think, couldn't match up to that thing or that pace, the speed with which the Jio is coming up, maybe.
Okay, fair enough. Now, this is a tricky one and my favorite part. Reliance Industries. Where will you categorize Reliance?
Reliance.
Yeah. Okay. One quick question. What business is Reliance in? Reliance Industries, if I ask you, what business is Reliance in?
I think Reliance is into multiple businesses.
Okay. Okay.
So they are always in the process of, incorporating new things. When they feel that one venture is going down, they'll come up with a new venture. So I think they are growing. So they are in the growth section, what I feel.
Growth section. Which growth? Young, high, mature, stable, decline. Which one? Okay, decline is out of the question, but mature growth, high growth, young growth.
I think mature growth.
Okay. So our guru calls this, Reliance is in the disruption business, something like what an Amazon is. Reliance enters a business, it disrupts the market. जिस business में Reliance घुसा, companies हाथ जोड़ती हैं, भगवान हमें बचा लो. That's how Reliance functions. That's how Amazon functions. It's a disruption platform. We know what they did with Jio. When they enter any business, they disrupt the market. Competitors are almost finished. So Reliance has a lot of free cash flows from their oil to chemical business. I talked about optionality premium. This is what you have to understand when you're valuing a company. A company like Reliance, a company like Amazon, they are very difficult companies to value because as valuers, we cannot understand what business they are in. मतलब आज Reliance TV निकाल रहा है, आज Reliance Jio निकाल रहा है, कल को Reliance Cabs निकाल रहा है. Reliance is going into retail. Reliance will be coming up with gold. I, as a valuer, I don't know what he's up to. What's his next big move, right? And मुझे ये पता है कि Reliance जो है वो next company को, whichever sector it enters in, it can disrupt the market, right? So just to wrap up this section, I think now you have a fair idea when we do valuations, Excel sheet से पहले we should see कि जो हमारी company है वो कौन से stage पे है, right? So companies are just like human beings. And to add to that, now an extension, right? Who wants to get old, right? बूढ़ा होना किसे पसंद है, right? तो ऐसी companies है, companies को भी बूढ़ा होना पसंद नहीं है, right? So the point is, this is what I called a ole scheme. Just as human beings don't like to age, companies don't like to get old. Maximum value of the companies are destroyed by those companies who do not try to act their age. You understand कि कोई if some old person is wearing torn jeans, how will he look? You have to act age appropriate, right? 100-year-old manufacturing company like ITC would be doing stupid things right now. You would feel for it. But ये जो log jo consultants, I mean, they are trying to push, these old companies to get young again. But the problem is कि आपका बुढ़ापा तो दिखेगा ही ultimately, right? 3-4 साल आपका बोटॉक्स इंजेक्शन या कुछ भी आप लगा रहे हो, क्रीम लगा रहे हो, that will act as a filler, but gravity will act as its own force. Nature will take its due course. I'm not saying that all companies will grow old and die. There are some companies which have risen from the ashes, like Apple. Apple was a company which transformed itself, from the lowest level possible. Steve Jobs coming back as a founder, as a CEO, he re-transformed the company. Now the company is the highest valued company around the world. So I'm not saying it's a one for all situation, but we have to look at Flipkart and Walmart deal. This is what our dean calls the most expensive cosmetic surgery in the world. The most expensive cosmetic surgery is why he calls it, because Walmart was a giant in the door-to-door retail section in the United States. Now, Walmart acquired Flipkart for $21 billion. The dean calls it the most expensive facelift in the history, because after making that $21 billion expenditures, Walmart is totally clueless right now as to what we should do next, because Amazon is killing it in the space, right? And the founders are gone. Sachin and Vinny are gone. So now they don't know what to do next. Somebody motivated them ki let's do this online business. Flipkart is a company which I project will not be profitable in the next foreseeable future. So Walmart is totally clueless about this acquisition. It was a very expensive acquisition. They just raised around $3.6 billion again. But Amazon is giving them tough competition and they're still cash negative. So moving on to the next part of my presentation. Just hold on. So coming to the idea part, right? Whenever startups, so this was about the life cycle and the life stages of the company. As as valuers, you should understand कि हम किस company को value कर रहे हैं, at what stage and life cycle the company is falling in, right? And once we figure that out, we'll be able to assess what future cash flows and what future growth assets that company can accumulate. And then we have to look at optionality and all those other things. So now coming to the most important part as to, startups, how they raise funding, what's the entire process of the startup world as to how they go about the funding process, right? First is the idea. What an idea, Sergi. What separates a good idea from a bad one? How do you know that your idea will work or not? It's simple. Your idea should solve a good problem. If you are certain that your idea will solve a good problem, then you should go for it. A lot of people just keep sitting on their first idea and they don't plan to execute out of fear of failing. All the top creators and entrepreneurs were laughed at, rejected, thrown out of rooms and companies, but they never gave up. I would like to tell everyone, if you're passionate about your business idea and you're convinced it would solve a problem, then you should jump on the idea, regardless of how people perceive it to be. The fundamental problem, please understand this, the fundamental problems of all big companies is that they are far, far away from reality. They are making decisions sitting in fancy corporate boardrooms and looking at Excel sheets. That is a big problem. So if you have a solid idea, first go and speak to the ecosystem, the actual people on the ground. Interview them, at least 100 from each contact sphere. That will make you realize that the problem that you're trying to solve is actually requiring some solving. Please make sure, and I'm repeating this, sorry about that. Please make sure, and I'm repeating this, that you do not get married to the idea, right? Absolutely make sure that you reach out to everyone in the industry and there is some validation for your kind of idea. Trust me, friends, many people will tell you it's a terrible idea, it's not going to work. And when they say don't just react calmly, so whenever people will say, oh, that's a very flop idea ki beta tumse na ho payega, so at that time don't react, okay? Just calmly ask them why do they think like that. It's just like a constructive criticism. mechanism. There is no cost of listening to others' comments, right? Ideas and feedbacks. Maybe some of it will help you. So you have to just look around you. There's so many billion-dollar ideas, billion-dollar companies are just there. You have to learn, search, validate, and identify the real solution to the problem that exists. Ritesh invented a technique which is called the zero draft technique. What he used to do was he used to write down 10 ideas, right? And he used to rank each idea in the order in the one he wants to solve the most. So zero draft is an ideation technique for individuals, often used by writers, and it's essentially a form of focus-free writing. For professionals, it can help focus the first stages of the new product by establishing what you currently know and getting your initial ideas out of the brain and onto the paper. So now moving on to the pitch part of it. So how to make a killer pitch? Okay. So I call this section कि सिर्फ 3 मिनट है तुम्हारे पास, आओ अपनी जिंदगी की सबसे अच्छी pitch करें. So I have a good idea, now what I do next, how do I get money? How do I get investments? How do I pitch it to investors? Begin talking about your idea to at least a few people around yourselves who you trust will give you an honest feedback about the challenges, questions, and problems that you have. Once you know that, try and write it down. Write down and you will find exciting, what's most exciting about the idea that you will pursue, how you will explain in 2 to 3 lines if you need to. This I want to tell all startup founders and all people who advise these startups that the pitch deck should not be a mammoth, 50 slides, 60 slides. The average concentration of every individual is not more than 2 to 3 minutes. He will sleep if your presentation is too long. So I have to be short, crisp, precise. Enter, tell the problem you're trying to solve, and tell how you are different from your competitors, right? So what's the competition like? Why would you be successful versus anybody else, right? Why do you even make money while doing this? Will people pay you for this? Why are you the first person who will try and make this happen? If somebody else tried it, why did they fail? A lot of questions will come about, and you may not have the answers for this, but attempt to write it the first time. I'll share what Ritesh told me about this. So Ritesh said that his first pitch, wherein he raised about $30,000 for his first idea, right? That at that time he was an online travel aggregator for all small budget hotels. Now that idea flopped. Why it flopped? Because when I'm booking from an app on a hotel which I don't know the credibility about, I will not go and book that, right? So Ritesh realized there was a problem there. Problem was that somebody needed some credibility to certify that these hotels were good and standardized, right? So Ritesh took on the challenge and he remodeled one hotel as a Oyo hotel, right? That had similar, standardized structures, standard facilities, which were solving problems and, giving people a basic infrastructure to stay. People like Ritesh's Oyo, there were similar startups which had started and failed. Why they had failed? Because they were focusing on people to solve the problem physically. Ritesh was different because he used technology. He used Autobots to solve the problem, to standardize the hotels. So the first investor that he got was Lightspeed Ventures, the first VC that he pitched this idea to. And while he pitched this idea to Lightspeed, he was asking for not more than $100,000. Lightspeed liked his idea so much, they gave him $500,000. And why did Lightspeed do that? Lightspeed saw a huge market gap, that all these small hotels are underserviced, under-accommodated, right? So they saw that Ritesh was onto something big here. It was a scalable model. These VCs, if they are, convinced that the entrepreneur is ready to go that extra mile and build this into a big scalable business, then this would be a good investment opportunity. You have to realize that this is something that grew from one city to almost all cities, and now it's across the world. So Ritesh is somebody like, he's 27, 28 years old. But that guy's story, that guy's story is so inspiring that at 13, 14 years old, he was reselling SIM cards. He was doing business after business. He kept failing, but he never gave up. He started the first online trading, aggregator platform for small businesses. At that time, there was nothing of that sort, but that also failed. Still, he never gave up because he was trying to go into the ecosystem and ask people about the real problems. Now, why, if I'm not booking a hotel which has a 2-star rating or a budget hotel, because I don't trust that hotel, right? I don't know how will it turn out to be once I book my room there. So some standardization needed to be there. Some ecosystem needed to be there. Now, there was a similar startup like Ritesh's Oyo. Before him, the difference between him and differentiating factor was, and that's how he was able to scale. So coming back to the pitch again. So when you're pitching to the investors, 3 things are important. First, you have to demonstrate why you feel so passionately about the idea that you're pursuing. Second is you have to have absolute clarity about what you're doing and where are you going to go in the next 6 months. You should be absolutely clear about the future of your idea, or with or without the investor. So do your homework well. Don't wait for the investor to bring the momentum. A good, successful entrepreneur, no matter what, he has to be prepared. And investors can be successful as well if they choose to partner with a successful entrepreneur. So it doesn't matter that if somebody is giving you a money, it's like a marriage. That person will be a strategic partner with you throughout. So if you are stuck somewhere, if you cannot scale your business, then you have to go to him and ask for his opinion. So whenever you are partnering with any investor, see that what value he brings on the table. There's a very interesting show in the United States which airs in India called Shark Tank. Now, I don't know how many people have watched that show, but that's a reality. These sharks, they invest their own money into these budding startups, and these guys bring some credibility on the table. So we see Ratan Tata, we see Binny Bansal, Sachin Bansal. These HNIs, they keep investing in startups which they feel will scale up, and they do it in their individual capacity. So the same way, the first stage of investment, which is the angel funding, is the most difficult, I would say, because here people are investing their own money. If I'm investing my own money, then obviously to get that initial investment would be very, very difficult as compared to a VC funding, right? A VC funding, as opposed to normal notions, VC funding is easier than an individual HNI funding, because in VC they are using somebody else's money, right? But whereas angels are investing their own money. So when there's a difference, but the point is that initially no VC would put money in your startup without an angel. They want to see proof of concept. They want to see whether this model is scalable or not. So the first pitch has to be, around that you don't have to, put unrealistic expectations that people, I have heard so many pitches where they say, oh, I'll reach to 1,000 crore revenue. No, you don't have to do that. Ritesh told me that his first pitch was that he had 2 salespeople, right? 2 salespeople, and he wanted to focus the investors, the angels asked him that where do you see yourself in the next 1 year? He said, I'll add about 2 salespeople. One salesperson will add one hotel in 1 month. So in 6 months, I'll add 12 hotels, right? And I want to see where it goes. Most problem with a lot of startup founders is that they start with market size. They say, okay, we'll reach 1,000 crore revenue in the initial pitch. Now, that's not what an angel investor is looking to hear, right? You have to be realistic. Your data points, your research has to be bang on. So that's where a difference between a good pitch and a killer pitch is, right? So that would wrap up my part of the presentation, and I would now invite Mayank to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav. So now the point is that once the pitch is there, now the next part is how to negotiate with investors. So ultimately आपका pitch तो सब बन गई. Now negotiation कैसे होगी? आपको क्या कितना so it's like you कौन डालेगा पैसा? You cannot just go to someone who has money and say, listen, I've got a great idea. I need you to put in some funds, maybe 20 lakh, 30 lakhs, 1 crore, 2 crore, jo bhi ho. Try asking your rich relatives. You will be shown the door. See, good startups and disruptive startups need much more funding. They need funding which can go into crores and crores. Why I am telling you all this is because as a CA, we as CAs of the clients, we are the first line of defense for the client. हर चीज हमारे से आकर के क्लाइंट पूछेगा फर्स्टली, या कोई लॉयर से पूछेगा, या मोस्टली सीए से पूछेगा, अच्छा जी मेरा बहुत अच्छा आइडिया है. और एल्स अ लॉट ऑफ आवर क्लाइंट्स और इन आवर प्रैक्टिसेस अ लॉट ऑफ द फादर्स एंड ऑल ऑफ आवर क्लाइंट्स वुड बी कमिंग ऑन कि मेरे बच्चे ने बहुत अच्छा कुछ स्टार्टअप का कुछ करा है, आप बताइए क्या करना चाहिए. कंपनी बनाए, एलएलपी बनाए, फर्म में ही रखें, प्रोप्राइटरशिप में ही रखें, या क्या करें? दैट इज वेयर आवर रोल कम्स इन. बट देन as a startup, I would always suggest पहले तो कंपनी बनाओ आप, because company is one thing जो scalable होती है. LLP में हर बार आप डेट नहीं चेंज करोगे, कोई नया इन्वेस्टर आएगा या इन्वेस्टर ने सेल आउट किया या कुछ किया. सबसे फर्स्ट थिंग्स फर्स्ट, कंपनी बनाइए. एक बार कंपनी बन जाएगी, उसके बाद में जाकर के यू पुट इन योर आइडिया टू द इन्वेस्टर. अब आइडिया के बारे में तो काफी प्रणव ने बताया. स्टेप्स क्या होते हैं कि रेजिंग द फंड्स के लिए. Firstly, holding the meetings with any investment banker and pitching the proposition. Usually investment bankers के पास में या किसी अच्छे merchant banker के पास में जाना चाहिए एक startup को. Directly HNI और fund houses के पास जाएगा तो he'll be shown the door, because many times they do not want to entertain individuals like you and me to just come up. Yes, I have a very good idea, I have a very great idea. Yes, there are people जो बिल्कुल सीड स्टेज में फंडिंग डालते हैं, बिल्कुल जब उपज होती है आइडिया की उस टाइम पे जब फंडिंग डालते हैं तो होते हैं ऐसे. मगर मोस्टली जैसे जैसे आइडिया थोड़ा भी ग्रो करता है, कुछ करता है, यूजुअली इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंक्स को हायर करना चाहिए. नेक्स्ट स्टेप ऑफ कोर्स होल्डिंग द मीटिंग्स विद एंजल इन्वेस्टर्स, नेटवर्क्स, फंड हाउसेस, एचएनआई इन्वेस्टर्स, सबके साथ आप मीटिंग होल्ड करो. जहां जो टाका फिट हो वो बहुत बहुत बढ़िया. नेक्स्ट स्टेज होती है नेगोशिएशन. नेगोशिएशन क्या है? नेगोशिएशन मींस अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स. इट डज नॉट ओनली मीन कि यार मेरे को एक्स फंड्स मिल रहे हैं 10x वैल्यूएशन पे, 10% डाइल्यूशन हो रहा है, और या डेट मिल रही है 12% पे, तो ठीक है ये रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट हो गया ना. दिस इज नॉट सो सिंपल एज दैट. Proper startups, they get funding from proper investors, usually go through different levels of negotiation in a broad spectrum. See, क्या negotiation हो सकती है? बोर्ड सीट चाहिए उस इन्वेस्टर को. भाई जो पैसा डाल रहा है, शुरू का पैसा डाल रहा है, चाहे वो 50 लाख डाल रहा हो, 1 करोड़ डाल रहा हो, उसको बोर्ड सीट हो सकता है चाहिए. इफ द फंडिंग इज थ्रू CCPS, CCD रूट, या आपके OCPS रूट के थ्रू, ऑप्शनली कन्वर्टेबल प्रेफरेंसेस है वो सब, तो देन उसके अंदर क्या कन्वर्जन रेशियो रहेगा. कल को आपने मेरे साथ तो 5 करोड़ पे राउंड 5 करोड़ की वैल्यूएशन पे अपना रेस कर दिए पैसे, और कल को दूसरा बंदा है उसको बोले आपने के 4 करोड़ पे आपने रेस करे हैं पैसे, तो देन इफ यू गो थ्रू अ डाउन राउंड, व्हिच मींस टू से देन इन दैट केस you eventually आपका your conversion ratio can change. So these are certain things. Or else if the startup goes bust or it discontinues, then how much funds would the investor receive? Because investors putting in the first funds, it does not mean okay, I am the equity shareholder, promoter is the equity shareholder, all of us will get funds equally. It may not work so simple as that, as agreements are structured in that way that सबको पैसा उस हिसाब से मिलेगा जिस हिसाब से उनकी not only waterfall, जिस हिसाब से agreement structured होंगी. Then eventually ये सब नेगोशिएशन के बाद में जब फाइनल क्या होता है, हमें बहुत पता होना चाहिए that this what should be final is the term sheet. Term sheet is the most important document. Why is term sheet the most important document? It's because it has a lot of things in it, which we'll be discussing in subsequent paragraphs, because term sheet, it will actually, it's that document which we see Firstly, because whenever a client is very happy, okay, we've just finalized a term sheet, or this is the draft term sheet that we have finalized, the client shows us the term sheet. There are a lot of things that we need to advise our clients. Due diligence by investors. Next to due diligence. What is due diligence? Due diligence means ROC compliance, legal compliance, trademarks and IP issues. Aapke tax compliances kaise hue hain? All the taxes which have been paid or not, where there has been any gross miscompliance or not, and also as a whole the business makes sense or not. Why does the business make sense or not? Yahan pe main bolta hu, a lot of people are like, ek Guru movie ka dialogue tha, baniya ho bhai. ठीक है, क्यों ऐसे, क्यों ये डायलॉग था? इसलिए डायलॉग है बिकॉज भाई numbers which you have pitched as an investor, they should make sense. Is the business actually profitable or not? ये ड्यू डिलिजेंस से पता चलेगा. बड़ी बार ड्यू डिलिजेंस में कई चीजें आती है जब टर्म शीट फाइनलाइज होने के बाद भी रद्द हो जाता है. दैट मीन्स टू से दैट टर्म शीट गेट्स कैंसल्ड एंड नो फंडिंग इज रिसीव्ड बाय द कंपनी. It's mainly because of the fact that that the term sheet itself may have a certain because the term sheet has certain conditions that due diligence will have to be first conducted, and due diligence may show a lot of regulatory lapses, it may show a lot of business lapses, it may show that the business itself is not that viable as the promoter is pitching out to be. So then once the due diligence gets over and you get a green signal from the due diligence people, then yes, now this company seems to be investment ready. Now you will get as an investor, so the investment company gets a conditions precedent. Here the CS role comes in, because what are conditions precedent? Like authorized capital will have to be increased. All the resolutions relate to rights issue, private placement, all the EGMs or the board meetings and all will have to be formed. Proper minutes will have to be made. All the minutes book will have to be ready. A lot of companies, the startup companies, they don't invest in all these company secretaries and CAs and all. They give very little remuneration, so they need to get hold of all these things and get them made before an investor comes in, because investor will never ever come in. A proper investor. I'm not talking about any Tom, Dick and Harry investor or a small or a relative investor who you know or a promoter knows. Okay, you invest some money in the company. I'm talking about proper investors, funds that are investing. They need proper compliances to be in place. So they would want your minutes book ready, your authorized capital to be increased to an extent, and all the resolutions, all the minutes, all the meetings, etc., to be made. All the valuation reports will have to be in place. And if the investment, usually sometimes investment comes in two phases. There's a primary investment, which means to say that the investor gets money in the company. And there is a secondary round also, which means to say that the investor will give certain money to selling shareholders, because so it's like if the investor is investing 5 crore rupees in the company, maybe 2 crores will go towards the selling shareholders and only 3 crores will come in the company. So your share certificates will also have to be ready, and all the your share transfer registers will have to be ready for all that. Once everything is ready, now comes the part where investment comes in. Now investment comes in, if it's private placement, we all know investment will come in a separate bank account. In rights issue, that's really not the problem, but usually, as we have seen in our past experience, usually investors like that the investment comes in a separate bank account. It's not touched before all the shares get allotted. Usually it's that. Now next step becomes the signing of the shareholders agreement. Once the shareholders agreement is finalized, it's signed. Usually shareholders agreement has a lot of other terms, which is called condition subsequent, which means to say now that the investment is there, now you have allotted the shares, that is fine, but you need to fulfill certain conditions. Certain conditions subsequent, which means to say like filings before ROC. What are the filings for ROC? That, okay, you have allotted the shares, a PAS-3 form has to be filed before ROC. Now you have made the shareholders agreement, but we all know there can be a lot of legal issues if the shareholders agreement provisions are not incorporated in the articles of association, because articles of association are those that govern the internal management of the company, while shareholders agreement is nothing but a side agreement between the shareholders and the company. So for the public, shareholders agreement has got no meaning. Any other investor wants to come in, or even if he sees the ROC database and he wants to understand the company, shareholders agreement will never be visible. So appropriate provisions of shareholders agreement need to be there with in the articles of association. Then any other specifics, like we were doing some work for a manufacturing company that got a good funding from VCs. Now they said that, you don't have NOC from the fire department, kindly arrange it within 90 to 120 days. There's certain conditions subsequent that can come in. So as a CA, we should know that these are the points that need to be considered while doing funding, because you see, it is not so simple as, aap hamare ko term sheet dikhao, and now you get in the money and then we'll issue the shares. No, as a CA, we need to understand that we are stepping into the consultant world also. As there have been a lot of rumor around, small company audits may not be there, the others will not be there. We need to understand, as CAs, we need to be relevant. For us to be relevant before our clients, we need to understand that the world is changing. Maybe my father may not know all these things also, that there were these conditions, subsequent conditions precedent. But yes, when I started working with startups, these are things that were not in existence 10 years back, 15 years back. These are things that are in existence now. So we need to be relevant for startups now, because that is where our role will come in. Startups really don't want CS just to advise us on those certain tax, ROC and FEMA and all these angles. No, startups want us to be a holistic consultant for them. And why lawyers only? We CS can also do certain works for all this. Yeah. So next is, what is the role of CAs actually? Ethically, CA cannot be the auditor of the company for which it is negotiating with investors. Of course, there is a specific restriction under Section 144 of the Companies Act, because a CA cannot be an investment banker or a merchant banker for the client. So we need to understand that, yes, our role, if it fits in as an auditor, good enough. Otherwise, we can always be a consultant. We can always be a side consultant for a CA, and that's really not a problem. It's actually it's actually remunerative in its own sense, because audit as a function has got one leg only, but there are so many more legs that a CA can do. Then if at all we as CAs are pitching in front of the investor, we should not be, so the investors don't actually want us CAs to give a lot of intricacies about the business. They want promoters only to give the intricacies, whether it is those investors or those investment banks. They would like to have a meeting with us just to get a brief idea about the business. Our role should be more focused on those financial aspects. Our role should be actually with the promoter, trying to make him understand what are different rights, what are different rights that he has. एक board seat देने से क्या problem हो सकती है? What can be an issue that if a particular investor has got maybe 26% shareholding, that a special resolution may not be able to be passed easily. The investor will have to be taken in line. If the term sheet has certain affirmative voting rights, which means to say that the investor will need to actually be consulted before some particular decisions are taking place in the company. We need to make the person understand what are these things. Sometimes investors also put in a cap on promoter compensation. What is that? A promoter, as per the promoter, ye to meri company hai. No, the company does not belong to the promoter. The company belongs to the shareholders. The promoter is just a guardian, a caretaker. He's one of the members of the board of directors. He's an employee also. So you have to understand, there many times these investors put in a cap on promoter compensation. It's not that, okay, you get 5 crore funding, 10 crore funding, the promoter can take in 20 lakhs per month as compensation. No, there may be some caps. We need to make the promoters understand those particular aspects of the term sheet. So then what is the stake dilution? What are the seniority of the instruments? Whether the supposedly like CCDs or OCDs, which means it's compulsory convertible debentures or optionally convertible debentures, they rank much higher than the preference shares. Usually, because I'm talking about these instruments because primarily investors invest in companies not through pure play equity shares. They invest through convertible debentures or convertible preference shares. We need to understand, we need to make ourselves and our basics clear around that. Before we advise a startup, we need to, as CAs, we need to actually understand what these investments are all about. हमने अपने CA में तो पढ़ा होगा, but for all practical purposes, we need to first reread, understand, unlearn what we have actually studied in text and learn what is there in real life. Read articles, read different term sheets if you can gather from different people, and actually understand what is funding with startups all about. Now, next is, of course, what is a term sheet? Well, I just told you term sheet is the most important document. Term sheet, actually, what is it? It's like a ROCA. Indian marriages, there's a ROCA between the investor and the investee. Kya hota hai ROCA? ROCA is not binding legally. There's no marriage that has taken place. No. ROCA is a moral binding. It's a moral binding. The term sheet actually says कि यार आप किसी और कोई और investor को नहीं देखोगे. आप कोई और and for the investor also, it is like you will, if at all everything goes fine, your due diligence goes fine, you will invest in this startup. These are all things that unless and until, as we call in English, shit hits the roof. Unless and until things like that happen, usually things go through. Once the term sheet is there, the marriage happens usually. It's the first document that is signed between the investor and the investee. As I've told you, it sets out certain broad aspects. Now, what are those broad aspects? I will pinpoint on certain points which I, as a consultant, have seen in many term sheets. What are the typical features? Now, brief about the transaction. Every term sheet has a brief around the transaction. कि transaction क्या है? What is the amount proposed to be invested? कितने पैसे invest हो रहे हैं? What are the exits proposed for any existing investors or promoters? कि अगर आज invest तो कर लिया, कैसे exit करेंगे वो भी एक brief देता है वो. Furthermore, pre-money valuation क्या है? What is the pre-money valuation? Which means to say that okay, pre-money valuation is 12 crores and the investor is investing 4 crores. So this means there is a stake dilution of 25% that's taking place. This is the broad-based pre-money valuation. In case of a debt instrument, it is a rate of interest. In case of debt, or of course, in case of dividends, in case of preference shares, it's a dividend. Typically, what I have seen in my experience is that investors investing through debt instruments or preference shares usually go in for a 0.1%, 1%, 0.001% type of rate of dividend or a rate of interest. And why is that? Is because they're actually wanting to invest in equity of the company. They just want the instrument as a debenture or a preference share because seniority is there. We have all studied in CA that debentures and preference shares rank higher than equity shares. So they just want to invest if at all the company goes bust or if at all the company does not do its business, these people can be first in line to get their money out and they can go away. It's not that the promoter will get an equal amount of money as them. Then comes in the investor's role in the company. What is the investor's role in the company? It's not only giving money. No. Really speaking, startups and all, they also want to understand what is the pedigree of investor. If someone, you and I are very rich, okay, I have a CA practice of maybe 100 crores. And I have a free cash flow lying of 10 crores every year and I want to invest in startups. No, if I am actually relevant to that investor, then into that company, then the company will really want my money. Otherwise, there are so many more people who are more relevant than you and me that they want their money. Supposedly, like I know one startup who has an who has an investor who's ex-CEO of a big consumer FMCG enterprise, or else an ex-banker who was almost an MD of a big bank. All these people want, so these startups want those type of people. And that's why they give a board seat to them also, or an observer seat. So that is what is the investor's role in the company. They get a position in the board also many times. And that position has their own pitfalls. Of course, if the company does any non-compliance, the director himself is involved in it. But then ultimately, this person advises the startup that how to grow, because he has seen other startups. He has seen other big companies operate. Furthermore, and what is the investor's role in the companies? A reserved matters. Many times there are certain affirmative voting rights that are there with the investor. For example, supposedly you want to do a capital expenditure of more than 10 lakh, 15 lakh rupees as a startup. You've got investor funding, person wants to be very aggressive, the promoter, he wants to do it. No, many times you have a cap. More than 10 lakhs, more than 15 lakhs, more than 20 lakhs, you need to get some investor approval also. That's the investor's role in the company, even though you don't need it for company law purposes, but your shareholders agreement, your term sheet would have it. Then typically term sheets also have an ESOP policy. ESOP policy with which the investor will say, okay, you want as a startup, you want an ESOP pool to be created, maybe 20%, 30%, 10% ESOP pool to be created. That is given in the term sheet and the investor approval is needed for that. Next is the rights and restrictions of promoters. You have to very well understand, promoters have to very well understand, like if we see as our consultant to those promoters, we have to understand that if at all investor invests money, there's no free ride. You can actually be bound by that investment. How? There's a lock-in of promoter shares that happens, that the promoter now cannot sell his shares to any third person. Okay, now the valuation is 5 crore, 12 crore. Now promoter holding 80% stake at 12 crore valuation. That means to say promoter stake is almost 9.6 crores and all. No, it's not like that. It's not so simple, because the promoter cannot liquidate 5%, 10% of his stake at any point of time. It needs specific approval from investor. Why is the promoter selling? Aisa kya ho gaya? Why does he need so much money? Okay, investor has got tens of millions of dollars, but investor is very smart. He would want his promoter to be there. He would want the promoter ki aaj 12 crores valuation hai, kal 120 crore hoegi, kal 1200 crore hoegi. These valuation increases, he wants the promoter to be there so that there is skin in the game for the promoter. He does not want the promoter for this shortfall. He wants it from the long haul. Then there are certain tag-along rights when the promoter intends to sell the shareholding. If at all promoter intends to sell, he would say, the investor would say, okay, fine, you sell. How much money? How much? You want to sell 10%? Okay, then you sell my 10% also, and then you sell 10%, your 10% also. So that is called a tag-along right. These term sheets have that. Of course, I've talked about a cap on promoter compensation. Next is the restriction on transactions related parties. This is a very interesting thing. What I saw in one of the startups is that the father had a company and the son started a startup in a similar business. Okay, but he was into online, the father was into offline. And the son used to take stock, which is the purchases from his father's company. This was very well told to the son while investing in his company that no purchases to be taken from your father. You take it from your father's ultimate source. You are his son. You would have easily the contact details and access to those people. That's totally fine. But you cannot do these related party transactions. There may be some hanky panky that may go along that. Then is the non-payment of any unsecured promoter loans or any investment by the promoters. This is very important. Many times these term sheets contain a specific embargo, like promoter has given 1 lakh as equity share capital, but may have invested 15-20 lakhs as promoter loans also, as a director loan in the company. So these investors do not want this director loan to be paid out of their own funds. This is where they can create an embargo. One has to understand, kalko promoter needs to encash some money, he gets funded. This has to be very typically seen from the term sheet perspective. And it's not that as CS we say, no, as a promoter, you should tell that this is a specific thing, you need to include that. If that is to be done, then you include that thing, that yes, this amount of money will be first utilized to pay the promoter. You have to be very specific. Otherwise, there's a breach of trust that happens. And many times that is why term sheets contain this specific clause. Then next is what preemptive rights. Preemptive rights means that those who have already invested in the company as first investors, second in line of investors, Series A investors or whatever, they get right to reinvest in the company at whatever valuation the next funding is being raised. Typically, in company law parlance, we call it a rights issue. But many times, rights issue may not be right word to say, because the rights issue is for existing equity shareholders as per section 62(1)(a). However, investors usually invest through CCDs or CCPS kind of route. So then if an investor has preference shares, then rights issue cannot be there. But yes, there is a preemptive right which will be enshrined in the articles of association also once the term sheet and everything goes through and shareholders agreement is made. So these things have to be understood as to how you have to go around it and how you have to go and take a specific investor approval every time you go through subsequent rounds of funding. Then is the anti-dilution. Now, what is anti-dilution? Anti-dilution means today, as I had earlier also mentioned, at maybe 5 crores valuation, you get 1 crore. What does that mean? That means 20% stake dilution. Now 20% stake dilution. Now next round of funding raised at 3 crores of valuation. Maybe you raise another 1 crore. That means to say the person who had first invested, who had first taken the risk, first met with the promoter and put in his hard-earned funds. Now those investors would feel shattered because next round the investor is raising at lesser amount. Now then if you go through to this is in VC world or in startup world, they say a down round. In case of a down round, these investors, they have an right to get additional shares also. How these additional shares come? If they have invested purely in equity, then the lowest possible equity, lowest possible amount will have to be shelled out by those investors, and fresh equity shares will have to be invested. Or else if they are investing through CCDs or CCPS, then the conversion ratio will change. Broadly, they say broad-based weighted average method or narrow-based weighted average method or full ratchet protection. These are different terms which you'll see in the term sheet. I won't go into very much specifics of that because that you can Google it easily. But these are terms which you can see, and you should know full ratchet protection, what is there, what is a broad-based weighted average protection, and what is a narrow-based weighted average protection. Then next is the liquidity preference. Liquidity preference, as what I have already mentioned, is that supposedly if in case there is a sale of brand, sale of business, liquidation or dissolution that happens, investors should get a preference that they have paid and invested their hard-earned funds. Many times the startup founders, they have not invested even 15 to 20 lakh rupees. They may have invested just 1 or 2 lakh rupees. Because the investor is right now investing not in the startup, he is investing in the founder. Shuru mein to. So therefore, because of this, in case any sale of brand, sale of business, and all that happens, many times these term sheets contain the fact that one time the 1x or 1.5x or 2x of the original investment amount will have to be paid to the investor. This is the liquidity preference. So that is why they say that that to avoid any sort of legal complications, investors don't tend to invest purely in equity shares. They invest in compulsorily convertible preference shares or optionally convertible debentures, so that they have, or compulsory convertible debentures, so that they have this kind of liquidity preference with them, which is legally possible also then. Other features? What are other features? Like right of first refusal. Major investors, they have the right of first refusal, like when any third party investor, like there's a pool of investors that come in, maybe 10 investors or 15 investors that come in, and usme se maybe 2-3 would want to exit in the mid only. There is no other round of funding, nothing, but they want to just exit. So every investment round is led by 2 or 3 major investors, and there are few smaller ones. So usually these major investors have a right of first refusal, which means to say these smaller ones, whenever they want to sell, then these major investors will be first asked, अच्छा मेरे को 100 रुपए मिल रहे शेयर के, मेरे को 10,000 रुपए मिल रहा है एक शेयर का, will you be with the first ones to buy it? If they say okay fine, you give it to us, then there and then it ends, because as a shareholder, if I'm getting an exit in that manner, if I'm getting my money for my shares through this thing, that's all fine by me. And why do the major investors want that? They don't want a lot of investors to come. They don't want you and me to come in. Why do they don't want you and me to come in? Because when you and me will come in, and supposedly we would want to exit from our investment very fast, then we will start to, we will start to downgrade the price of that startup. Okay, can I get someone at 10,000 rupees a share? No, it's not possible. Maybe then 8,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees, and I may be even able to sell it at 1,000 rupees a share. Then that means to say that is a very, that's negative for marketing of the startup also. Because if at all these transactions tend to happen at low value, the startup's valuation also decreases. So major investors want their money protected. So that is why they always get a right of first refusal. Then is the exit. There's always an exit clause in a term sheet. What is an exit? Typically, all these term sheets have an exit clause wherein they say that exit can be provided through an IPO, through a sale to an identified strategic or non-strategic investor, through a buyback, and through any other manner. Usually investors in the first rounds of fundraising, series A, B, or even lower seed round and angel round of investments, there's a targeted IRR which is given to the investor, which is in the range of anywhere around 18 to 24%. That is a typical IRR what these investors ask. Now you will say, 18 to 24% to bahut zyada hai. No, these investors invest in multiple startups. They know that a lot of them will fail. So therefore, if you can easily, in fact, even bind the promoter or make him legally bound that, okay, if at all we are investing, you will try to give us an exit at 20% IRR. Whether that thing happens or not is a secondary thing. But the promoter on the back of the mind knows that, yes, I have to give an IRR to the investor. Then he will try to, of course, he will try to manage his funds better. And we as a CA will also need to tell the promoter that, yes, these may not be legally binding on the promoter, because if at all the company goes through an IBC route, then the waterfall approach starts to kick in, and the investor can get a 1x or whatever of the valuation, or he will get very little funds, maybe just 10% funds out of 90% maybe haircut. But ultimately, there is a moral obligation and a sort of legal obligation if at all the startup is very profitable and the investor wants an exit. Because when the startup is profitable, now we know that the investor does not mind to carry along in his investment, but the investors many times, these are funds. They have certain targets. They may be closed-ended funds also. Okay? They need to pay back their investors in 5 years' time or so. So therefore, certain targeted IRR needs to be mentioned so that the promoter can find another buyer and then the fund can exit easily. Then what is a drag along right? In case the exit is not provided by the promoter and the company, and the investors want an exit at whatever cost, they want an exit, they can easily drag along the promoter and other shareholders of the company to facilitate an exit. This means to say that usually this happens in 2-3 years that the business is not performing according to expectation. But yes, the business has created a brand. It may not be profitable as such, but the business has created a big brand in itself, and the investors are getting jittery that the business may that you will need to invest more and more in the company. So as a CA, we need to understand what this drag along right would actually mean. Promoter can lose control of his business. We have to tell him that this drag along right is very important, that promoter can lose control of the business, because if he is not able to provide an exit to the investors, the investor can easily drag along the promoter and the other shareholders and push an exit. Then what are some other terms? Certain other terms become, like exclusivity. So that not to discuss or negotiate with anyone, or as I have already mentioned, term sheet is like a ROCA. You get an exclusivity factor that you don't discuss these investments or for further investments in the startup till the round gets over. Why do we call it a round? It's usually in a typical investment in VC circle. We need to understand it's a round of investment. A round means that, yes, the investor comes in, understands the company, or you pitch in the investor, understand it. The investor puts in the money, and then in the process gets over, and that's how you get the money back. This is that's how you get the money in the company. This is called a specific. This is called a round of investment. Then other terms are pre and post shareholding pattern of the company. This is typically given in the term sheet. As I've already mentioned, conditions precedent are given. What are the reimbursement of expenses related to deal? Because every deal, every investment has some or the other legal complications, legal issues involved around it, or taxation issues involved around it. So promoter is usually given a certain budget, maybe 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs of budget to hire consultants so that everything can be smoothly functioned. Then every term sheet has a specific validity. Validity means, yes, 60 days, 90 days. It's not very specific, but yes, usually term sheets have a 60 to 90-day validity that, because as an investee company also, yes, an investor signed a term sheet, but if the investor does not have funds, or if he does not appoint a due diligence company to due diligence CA firm or due diligence firm to come in and do the work, then the investee company needs funds. It can go to other investors also. So therefore, every term sheet will have a validity around it. Then sometimes these term sheets have a drop dead fee. It's not in all, but we have seen in very, very few term sheets. Drop dead fees means that now the investor and the investee company have signed the term sheet, and if the investee company backs out, that no, I have some other, now have some other investor coming in at a higher valuation. So usually then these investors or these fund houses have a drop dead fee of maybe 10 lakh rupees, 20 lakh rupees, 5 lakh rupees, or even as high as 1% of the investment coming in, which means to say that these investee companies will have to pay the fund house to because they have not gone through with the entire investment. Now, next is, of course, the confidentiality aspect, that, these term sheets are very, very, very confidential documents. They don't have to come out, because the moment it comes out, it can be either ways. It can be very disparaging to the company also sometimes, because some other competitors can put in false media reports about the company, or even genuine media reports, but something more in the confidential nature. So these are all very confidential things. Then governing law and jurisdiction. Typically, investors like to have their own governing law, which is like maybe if it's a Singapore-based investor, they would want the governing law to be of Singapore. If it's a Mumbai-based investor, they would want the governing law to be Mumbai High Court and everything. So these are the typical features around the term sheet. And I hope as CAs, we have got a fair bit of idea about the pitch deck, how to make it, how the term sheet has been, how to negotiate with investors, and how typically term sheet, which is the most important document of the company, actually is done. Thank you.
Great. Awesome, Mayank. So, Radhika, let's play another game if you're up for it. I think you are, right? Hello? Can I hear you? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Can
okay,
you
so
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Let's play another game, right? So let's say you are the founder, okay, and I am the investor, okay. Now you are pitching me your idea. Now you are at a seed level, right? And how I want you to answer this question: how your pitch would be different from a seed round to, let's say, if you're raising $1 billion US. Think about it. See, you are raising a seed round of, let's say, $1 million, right? Now, what is the difference when you're raising 1 million versus a 1 billion? What's the fundamental difference in the fundraise?
I think you only should help us with this, So let us also know how to pitch for this, because it's coming from the speaker itself. It sounds very good. What you say?
No, there's no right or wrong answer, Radhika. Here, the point is you have to see that when you are young, right? That's what I mentioned in the corporate life cycle. It's all ideas, right? It's all dreams. You're selling dreams. You have to understand the difference between a young company and a mature company and a high growth company, right? Now, when you are a young company, you are just a baby who's born, right? A baby's dream, they do nothing else, right? So the same way, it's just that you are selling dreams here, right? So the amount of funding is based on your dreams and your conviction to fulfill that dream. I mentioned that you are solving a good problem, right? If there is a good problem to solve, people have money to invest in that. Always remember that. Now, when you are raising $1 billion US, how does it change? Come on, try. You can be wrong. You don't have to worry about the right or wrong answer. How will your pitch change when you are raising $1 billion vis-a-vis a $1 million? What will change in your pitch?
The concept will change. I mean, the presenting of the idea will change. If I am pitching for a higher amount, so the whole concept will change. I have to think in the other direction as to how the investor, if I pitch something on a higher ground, how the investor gets satisfied and, goes with me. Oh yes, this is the idea what we want to.
Okay. So the difference here is now your idea is matured, right? The proof of concept is there. It's working, it's generating cash flows, but you are not cash flow positive. Now it's not an idea, but a mission. what I told you about Reliance, it's a disruption platform. It's a disruption company, right? Now, your company is not a company, but a mission. So a mission to deliver and to disrupt the market, right? When you're asking for $1 billion, you are asking for a disruption, something that you will make you the market leader. Nobody else would have done that. So you have to understand pitches change with investors. With every round, the pitch change, right?
Yeah.
Let me play one more game with you, okay? Okay. So who would you want to be hire? So let's say you're the HR head of Vodafone India. Okay, you are given this task of hiring the next CEO. Okay, who would you hire for Vodafone India? Will you hire a Steve Jobs or will you hire an Elon Musk? You can use Indian names also, or a Ratan Tata. Okay, out of the three, whom do you think would be the best fit as a CEO? And Mayank can also give his views, but we want Radhika to answer this first, and then Mayank can pitch in. Who do you think would be the most appropriate CEO for a company like Vodafone India? Will it be Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, or Ratan Tata?
I think I'll go for Steve Jobs.
Okay.
Because he has the idea and a vision to fulfill the dream. If there are any loopholes which are coming in my way, I need to get rid of those dreams. I need to get rid of those loopholes so that I am back on track with the new invention, with the new ideas, how to reintroduce the Vodafone into the consumer market so that the consumer gets attracted to it and again stay connected with the Vodafone. Because right now the consumers are getting away from Vodafone, and every second day they are giving what do you call that? They're giving reasoning to leave Vodafone. So I think we need such a CEO who can give them and who can reshoot back and give them what they are looking for. In fact, beyond that, I go for them.
Great. Awesome answer. Perfect. So just give a brief background about Steve Jobs. See, Steve Jobs was somebody who invented the Lisa. Okay. He invented Macintosh. He was a dreamer. He would work 24 hours a day. Okay. He was a crazy guy. Nobody used to listen to him. He was somebody who would not take no for an answer. Okay. Steve Wozniak was his founder member who created Apple too. So the point is that Steve Jobs was a visionary, right? He came back in the second innings with a Tim Cook who could run the show for him. So he is the guy who pulled Apple from the graveyard. Now Apple, as I mentioned, is some company which is cash positive. So it created a Macintosh which is something that a Vodafone Idea needs right now. They need a Macintosh to able to rise from the grave. Otherwise, they are a declining company, as we all know. Okay, so when you do your valuations, and this is for everyone, you have to look at the founders and the CEO and the board who's running the company. Now, people have this habit of just looking at Excels and projections. No, that's not how valuation works. You have to see the board. Who is running the show for you? The entrepreneur, right? I talked to Ritesh. Ritesh is got a vision which is clear. I want to reach here. That's why he's driving every people. He's reading, researching so much. To share a very personal thing that he shared with me. He used to do cold emails, right? People say, how do I find an investor? What he used to do was that your name and your full name @ let's say ICAI.com, right? So it's very easy to find emails of these founders, of these VCs, of these people who you want to raise funds from, right? And he used to write an interesting email, right? He used to write that, please give me your 19 minutes or like 7 minutes, something like that, out of the box. So he used to send it to 1,000 people and two would reply, and those two were good enough for him to raise those funds. So I am just saying that people, feel that, raising funds is difficult. Yes, it is, but you have to think out of the box. So yeah, I think that sums it up for us. We are value monks, and we are going to, bring about a lot of videos on valuations on YouTube. So we want this to grow. We want people to learn about valuations in a way that they have not seen before. Valuations is not on Excel sheets. This is our mantra, and we want people to learn about this. Thank you, ICAI, for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
I have one question for you.
Sure.
What is the best way to understand a startup ecosystem and how to upgrade or develop a skill as a consultant for a startup?
See, for consulting a startup, I would really suggest that how I started. Firstly, was I got one of the startups who actually told me about this thing, that he wants to raise some funds, and he is just talking to some investors around it. Now, point was that over there only, that is where I started to read a lot about it. Now, there were no webinars as such. I never knew anything about term sheet, anything like that. There were no webinars around it, or even basic assets. CS don't have many. A lot of CS don't have access to all these, as well as the CS community per se does not function more in those spaces like where preference shares are allotted, or debentures are allotted and all that. So I went back to the basics and understood all these terms. And you have to typically understand, just Google any term sheet. Also a very, very interesting thing would be read through the articles of association of certain big startups who have raised funds recently, because articles of association typically are nothing but shareholders agreement cut, copy, paste, and put in the articles of association. And when I read through all that, then the entire term sheet started to make a lot of sense to me, because at the moment that makes sense to you, then you can actually be a consultant to the startup. Secondly, make the startups understand and realize that compliances, as basic compliances as minutes book, which many companies don't tend to make in a very practical basis. That is also very important. A fixed asset register and all these things. You have to make them understand that if at all they want to grow big and blow out, that is very important, that you have to understand that these basic compliances are done.
Oh, thank you so much. I must say, what an eye-opener session. And I hope others will also agree with me on this. And yes, interactive session. I had great fun. Thank you so much. I would like to invite again the Vice Chairman of the Jodhpur branch of CIRC ICAI, CA Dhaval Kothari ji, to please extend a vote of thanks to our esteemed speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. On behalf of Jodhpur branch of CIRC of ICAI and CPE committee of ICAI, I CA Dhaval Kothari, first of all, my sincere thanks to Almighty God for making today's event a grand success. By His blessings and grace, we are able to make the event what it was. I give a really heartfelt vote of thanks to our speakers, CA Pranav Goyal ji and CA Mayank Mukherjee, who spent his busiest time. We are very glad to know that there is a key role of CAs in advising a startup and negotiating in fundraising. It's a new area where we can see lots of opportunities. In a startup, be authenticate and real. Never give up, believe in yourself. Success will be at your door. Step. It's a very important to follow proper steps while negotiating or fundraising. We have to take care that if we are negotiating for a company, we cannot audit that company. Term sheets should be in detailed and analyzed before going to investor. I would like to thanks to moderator of today's VCM, CA Radhika Goyalji, for handling VCM in a smooth manner. And last but not least, I would like to thanks to all participants. Without their role, it is not possible to make it successful. Thank you once again. Over to you, Radhika ji.
Thank you so much, sir. And I'm really grateful to CPE Committee of ICAI, along with Jodhpur branch of CIRC of ICAI, for giving me this opportunity to actually, be the moderator of an entire session, of entire interactive and a very energetic session. Thank you so much, Balveer sir. Thank you so very much. Over to you.
all of you, sir. बहुत अच्छा रहा प्रोग्राम, बहुत VCM बहुत ही वंडरफुल प्रोग्राम है.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks to all.
Thank you so much, sir. So shall I stop the recording?